Hey listeners, this is your host, Cosmic Naruto. Thank you so much for being here. You can check other videos too. Now let's get on to the video. The deck of The ship was for the most part busy with activity as the crew set the ship's rigging as they came in upon the small island. Nation of Wave Country, which contained their newest mission, on the command and navigation deck. A young man in a long black woolen jacket that seemed to end just below his waist and what looked like a set of bird wings. He had a faux-like design on the side of his coat as walked up and pulled out a telescope to see the island for himself. Right at this moment a young woman in form-fitting clothes with medium-length red hair and glasses walked up to him to give her report. It's just as we feared, cousin. He has control of every shipping port on the island. We are going to have to go ashore with the longboats to remain undetected. He then closed the telescope and then handed it to her. He then turned to her and motioned for her to follow him down to the main deck of the ship. His hair was a bright blonde that seemed to be kissed by the sun itself, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to be one with the sea as you looked into them, but it was the whisker-like marks on his cheeks that had given him his eotic looks from the beginning and had also given him the nickname of Black Foe, as he was fond of wearing black with a little dark orange here and there. Well, if that's the case, cousin, we will just have to pay this Gato a little visit now, won't we? She gave him a nod of her head and pushed her glasses up and then began to bark orders out to the many sailors manning the ship as he then entered his cabin and began to finish his outfitting of his own equipment. He instantly put on his belt around the jacket as well as his sword strap and began to arm himself as soon as possible. He picked up a strange-looking katana and placed it in his scabbard and then his wrists, revealing his hidden blades that were as black as night itself and many other impressive weapons that he had at his disposal, and then turned to a picture showing his life before all this happened to him. With this said and done, he quickly walked out of his private cabin, pulling up the black hood that kept his identity secret from so many, and walked back up to the helm of the ship. All of the men and women that manned the ship all had reasons for being aboard his vessel known as the Black Vein, what many call one of the most dangerous pirate ships in the elemental nations. They were here to restore their homeland and its way of life that had been stolen from them so long ago. Not only was their nation that of mighty sailors and merchants, but they were also the warriors of an ancient order too, and for you see they were the last of the assassin brotherhood. Tsunami screamed out as she was thrown from her home by one of Gato's mercenaries. Two of them had quickly run up and grabbed her by her arms, not caring how she felt, and a third emerged carrying her son by the back of his t-shirt. She then heard one of them say, "The boss said we only need the woman, so what should we do with this little shrimp here?" But before any of them could even say a word, the one holding the child was struck in the head by an unknown object that was preceded by a loud bang. His comrades watched in shock as his body hit the ground hard with a tail of crimson liquid in the air. Before they could even register what had occurred, the man on the right was also shot right between the eyes and fell back, hitting the ground very hard. The last remaining enemy then heard two more loud bangs and then felt sharp pain in both of his knees and hit the ground screaming as he saw what looked to be any men and women walking out of the forest that was not that far from the house. He then looked up to see one of the men holding a rather strange-looking weapon and turned to a hooded man with an aura outlined foe on his side of his coat and then said, "Just as you requested, Captain. He's still alive for interrogation." The foe nodded to him and then walked forward and brought his foot down hard on one of the injured man's knees, forcing him to scream out in agony. He then came down to face the man and said in a commanding voice, "Tell me, do you fear death?" The man could only nod his head as Naruto then said, "Good, then you can tell me what I want to now, because if you don't you'll learn just what happens to men like you who try to murder innocent women and children in our presence." The and then quickly spoke in a pleading type of tone, "Please don't kill me, I was just following orders." "And what, pray tell, would those orders be?" "We were ordered by our boss Gato to capture the bridge builder's daughter and his grandson and bring them to him to be used as hostages against the old man, as well as to kill the two ninjas that he hired and the ones protecting the old man as well." The man said, pleading for his life as the Black Foe looked down upon him. Naruto then removed his foot from the man's knee and walked over to the woman and asked of her, "Where would your father be today, my lady, so we might be able to save him?" Quote, despite what many people might have thought of Tsunami, she was well versed in the world, including who this young mysterious man was, and felt absolutely no fear. R from him and pointed in the direction and then spoke. He's at the bridge now with the 2 Konoha ninja teams he hired to protect him. Naruto simply nodded his head to her and turned to his crew and began dishing out orders. Get back to the Veen right now and get her to the bridge right away and await my orders once you get there and hide in the fog. The crew nodded and began their way back to the ship. However, one of them quickly took out a gun and killed the would-be kidnapper to prevent him from being a threat in the future to any more innocent people. The crew turned back to watch the IR captain literally run up a tree and disappear into the foliage, realizing that things were going to get very interesting very soon, and then began to run back to the ship as fast as they could. Inari looked up to his mother and asked her, "Who was that, mother?" That the son was the captain of the Black Veen. He's known to many as the Black Foe and I don't pity Gato one bit. So, this is how it ends for me and Haku. Zabuza thought to himself as he saw the copycat ninja himself Kakashi Hatake coming in for the kill, only to watch someone catch the copycat's hand within inches of piercing his and Haku's flesh, and then got a good look at this person and said, "It's been a long time, foe." It has it not, Zabuza? Kakashi was now very concerned with the appearance of an S-ranked ninja and notorious pirate who was said to be at least a Kage level in many people's views. The dogs holding Zabuza in place eventually disappeared, allowing the former swordsman of the mist to move again. He took one look at foe and knew why he had come in the first place, and then said to Kakashi, "We are no longer enemies, Hatake." Kakashi was then released by the Black Foe, who then watched the young man walk right past the 2 mist ninjas and then look at the retreating fog to see none other than Gato and his mercenary army waiting for them. Gato had a shit-eating grin and arrogance look upon his face as he looked at the group of shinobi before him and decided to taunt them a bit. "I'm so glad I was never going to pay you, Zabuza. After all, it's far cheaper just to have my army here do it than pay you all that money." It was right at this moment that Gato heard a rather disturbing laughter as a man in black clothing with a hood walked forward and then said for all the mercenaries as well as their employer to hear, "Tell me, Gato, do you fear death?" Gato didn't know what to think about this strange young man, but then was more surprised to hear shaking coming from one of his mercenaries and turned to look at men. "I'm not paying you to just stand there and shake in your boots. I order you to go kill that," the pathetic young man. However, Gato was unprepared for what the mercenary said. "Net, please call me, I'll leave. I didn't mean no harm to these people." "Then leave, I know you fear death." After the foe said this for all to hear, the mercenary in question tore through the rest of the mercenaries trying to get out of the area, remembering what had happened with his last encounter with the Black Foe and his ship and the carnage that followed it. Several of the other mercenaries had heard him talk about what had happened a few years earlier when he thought he could take on the notorious pirate known only as the Black Foe, and that he said he would run for his life and that they should do the same if they did not want to be killed by this man who many have said had been gifted by Davy Jones himself. And everything the man had said to them about this notorious pirate was starting to make some sense as he walked forward and then motioned off the bridge to what looked like a large fog bank sitting off in the distance from the bridge, only to watch a large black pirate ship come out of it and turn to its side, bearing all its guns upon the mercenaries. Gato's eyes went wide, realizing that this young man was indeed someone who needed to be afraid of, as the Black Foe then brought up his left arm and dropped it, pointing out the mercenary army and their employer, and shouted for all to hear, "Fire!" Within a second the Black Veen opened fire upon the bridge area containing the MIDG. Ed and his mercenary army, killing many of them in the first volley. Kakashi Kurenai and their teams, including the 3 young members of their squads who had been knocked out by Haku earlier, now watch Ed the preceding battle, or slaughter if you wanted to call it that. The mercenaries were now in total shock as the famous pirate ship known as the Black Veen cut them down without even a care in the world, and when the main cannons did not fire because of the reloading process, the ship's snipers up in the rigging and the crow's nest took shots, hitting many of the mercenaries directly in the head. Raul, however, managed to get out of the main killing area and ran right at the Black Foe himself, hoping to end him once and for all. Naruto quickly activated his hidden blades, which were as black as night with gold inlay images of foes, and went to work cutting the mercenaries down with little to no effort, realizing that they had very little appearance taking on someone who was trained by the most notorious shinobi, pirates and privateers who were just seeking to clear their name as well as his bloodline, which gave him all of his ancestors' memories and skills, including the more notorious ones who were also assassins and pirates. Sasuke could only watch in utter shock at this pirate's skill level and those strange weapons he had on his arms, which made him even more deadly, and wanted this power for himself. At the moment, however, he was more of a burden to his team as well as to his aspirations and desires for revenge. He could only watch the battle at this time and was thankfully he had aided his Sharingan and was committing everything that he saw to memory for later use in his training and ultimately to be used in his revenge. Gato had never been more scared in his life. One moment he thought he was in absolute control of the situation, and the net he was hiding behind part of the bridge, hoping that none of the shots from the cannons would hit him, and even used some of his men's body as a shield to protect him as he heard screaming and then saw one of his men fly forward with his head missing, only to see the head hit the ground a few feet from him a second later. Gato at this moment began to try to run away, only to receive a bullet to his leg, forcing him to fall to the ground for his efforts. He then began to try and crawl away, hoping to escape, only to feel a foot slam down upon his injured leg. He then looked up to see none other than the same young man who had been insulted by him, and began to plead for his wretched life. "Please, I'll give you whatever you want, just spare my life." The foe just laughed at him and then said, "Have you forgotten about the stories, Gato? I'm a heartless wretch to someone like you." With that said, he quickly pulled out his gun once more and shot the miserable midget several times and emptied the clip in the process. As soon as this was done, he holstered his weapon and walked over to Zabuza and Haku, only to hear a gas come from the one-eyed leaf ninja. It was at this moment that he remembered that his hood had been pulled down and let out a small curse, as he then turned to the leaf ninjas, who seemed to be trying to come to grips with what they were seeing. Seeing as, he quickly turned his head to Haku and said, "I hope you have some chakra left, love. I would really like to get out of here without them trying catch me." She quickly nodded her head and opened a huge ice mirror, which the three then jumped right through before Kakashi could even make it to the spot to try to knock them out, only to see the mirror appear on the deck. The Black Vein. With the three of them walking out, one of the crew members then walked up to Naruto and handed him a black hat with a top red line about it. He then walked to the railing of the ship for the Konoha ninjas to see and hear him, as he then shouted for all to hear, "I would say it was a pleasure seeing you again, Cyclops, but that would be a lie. Just know that you had a chance to capture Capt. Naruto Uzumaki." Kurenai had also run to the edge of the bridge and could only wonder out loud, "That has got to be the best pirate I have ever seen, Kakashi." He turned to look at her with a somewhat angry look about him and said, "You have no idea how important he is, Kurenai. We need answers about him, otherwise we will be in the dark about him forever." Kakashi then walked up to Tazuna and asked him, "Is there a pub for sailors here in the village?" "Yes there is, I can take you to it later if you want." "Thank you, we'll go later today. First things first though, I need everyone to get them back to the house immediately. Sakura Hinata, get as many of those needles out as you can out of them right now so we can get them back to the house where you two can remove the rest later." The two young girls simply nodded and got to work as they both heard Sasuke muttered something about wanting that power. Sometime later that evening, Tazuna led them to the pub, which was called the Deep Blue Pub. As soon as the two ninjas entered the pub, they heard many men and women singing a sea shanty song that went something like this: "Yo-ho yo-ho, a pirate's life for me." They then nodded. One old sailor with a blackbeard drinking some rum with a wooden leg, who Tazuna immediately brought them over to take one look at the ninjas, and smiled as Tazuna then introduced them. "Allow me to introduce you to Captain Holloway." "Captain, allow me to introduce you to Hidden Leaf Ninjas Kakashi and Kurenai." The old sea salt then just smiled at them and motioned for them to sit down, as he then said, "I know why you're all here. You want to know about him. You want to know about the Black Foe." They nodded their heads as he laughed a little bit and then said, "I was a pirate once, you know, and hot myself, the most feared man but fair who ever sailed these waters, but this young man." He then poured all of them a bit of rum and then continued with his story. "He was the one who saved me and sent me here. It was time I retired anyway, but it's what I saw him do to those slavers who worked for the people made us all pirates in the first place. I saw him single-handedly clear the deck of a water country ship, saving the doomed souls aboard and killing the people any in his path. They say the legendary goddess herself, Calypso, and the spirit of Davy Jones himself blessed the Black Foe with amazing powers and the contract to summon amazing creatures that once roamed the seas." By this point the entire pump had stopped whatever they had been doing and listened to the story of the Black F. O as the old salt took another drink and then continued, I saw him fighting like the devil himself, cutting them down with absolutely no problem or mercy, and when we found out T-Clan and Nation we knew just how dangerous he was going to be. And he's a cunning one, oh yes, he knows his way around the elemental seas better than anyone. Kakashi as well as everyone else was listening very intent as the old man then started his story once more after taking another drink. It's even said that he has the respect of the 7 swordsmen themselves, so if it's fortune and fame you seek as well as freedom from our oppressors, then Captain Naruto Uzumaki is your man. Just a word of warning to you all, don't meddle in his private affairs, for there is more mystery to that man than even I dare ask. A song starts playing in the background. Full Circle by Half Moon Run. The sea is shown with the wake of a ship shown as a black ship with the words Black Vein embedded in its side sails through the blue waters of the elemental nations. On the deck overlooking the ship and the sea itself was the captain, who was quite content despite what had happened this day. This is the first chapter of this new story, which was inspired by the upcoming AC-4 Black Flag and Pirates of the Caribbean. I decided that Naruto would have in a combat-like situation the attitude of and speech pattern, even voice of Davy Jones. And when he's around friends would act a little more like Jack Sparrow, but not up to the same level as the character that Johnny Depp created. He will also have at other times a bit of Barbases at times. This first chapter was more of an introduction to the story and give you a little bit of his place in the world, as there are quite a few things happening as well as the thread of the remaining MPLARS, since this is still predominantly an Assassin's Creed story. I would also like to hear what you think about his choice of crewmates, as I made sure to leave either hands or names at the 2 prime members and will do more to spend everything about them later on. Naruto will also be a few years older than the rest of the rookies in the story. Please read and review. Zabuza walked the deck of Black Vein with a sense of hope for the first time after hearing from Naruto that the civil war was finally over and those responsible had been dealt with accordingly. He was also happy to hear that his old friend May had become the new water shadow of the Hidden Mist village. Zabuza Momochi, the master of the Executioner Blade, simply looked up at that moment as the mighty black ship moved through the sea on its way back to its hidden harbor, and from there on to what was left of the 3 once great naval powers that had protected so many lives. But now, because of the greed of men, they were reduced to nothing more than pirates, but their enemies would regret that, since it was through this action that they would retain their freedom and honor and the power as well to set the world right again in the process. He then saw his adoptive daughter Haku walk up alongside him and speak to him. Have you ever been to this shipwreck cove, as they call it? He turned and looked her right in the eyes as he then said, once a long time ago. Back then it was just a hidden military base that the 3 great naval powers used, but now it's one of our few hopes to save our way of life. She then looked up to the bridge to see the young pirate lord and decided to ask another question. How do you know that pirate lord up there, father, and is he really as terrifying as they say? He smiled underneath his bandages and then said, well, he's much like myself when it comes to his friends, but if you're an enemy he lacks my merciful nature and sense of fair play as well as a good temper. I met him when he just started his training to use that sword of his, which is said to have been created by the same swordsmith who created the blades for our little group. This surprised Haku, as she had been told how rare a sword made by that man were, and was surprised to say the least, and they had only been made for the 7 swordsmen of the mist. I was unaware that he made more than just the 7. Quote, well, my daughter, he also made all the blades that the pirate lords themselves used. Of this little group here there are 7 of them as well, but Naruto would have gotten one anyways considering who and what he is. You mean because he's an Uzumaki and an assassin? She asked her father as she watched the pirate lord go about his duties as the young redhead and the other young man walked up to him. Zabuza could only let out a laugh as he heard this question and then said, well, you're half right, but believe me, he still had to earn that blade of his. But let me ask you something, daughter, do you have a crush on him? She blushed at her adoptive father had said to her, you're not helping. Naruto walked up to the ship's railing and looked out upon the sea in utter amazement as he saw the moonlight dance upon the surface of the water. He then heard noises strictly behind them, turned to see his cousin Karen and first mate Suigetsu. He turned to his cousin and they said, I didn't think hey, we're going to find out who I was so fast. Suigetsu rolled his eyes and then said in a shark-like grin, thinks to his teeth, well, as you're so fond of saying foe, nothing ever lasts. Karen in all of her red-headed glory just slapped him in the back of the head, turning it into water from the impact. She then turned to her cousin and said, "Yeah, but they're ninjas, not pirates, so I didn't think they know very much about you anyways. And let's face it, you're quite notorious for escapes and getting out of a very sticky situations." Naruto could only roll his eyes at their antics as he heard Karen speak once more. "But seriously, I have to ask you a question. What happens if you gain the opportunity to go back to the Hidden Leaf and it's not for a job?" He gave her a smile and then said for everyone to hear him, "Oh, you know me, cousin, I love those moments. I like to wave at them as they pass by them and give them the bird, if you get my meaning." She once again was surprised by his words and hit him in the back of the head as well. It went down to her private cabin to rest for the night and to await the morning shift. He then rubs the back of his head and picks up his hat and then turns to Suigetsu. "Well, you are in command and the ship is yours until morning. Oh, and one more thing, if you damage my ship I'm going to kill you." Suigetsu, needless to say, quickly took a hold of the wheel like his life depended on it. Which, despite what many people might think, it really did, as he had learned to fear the black foe and his cousin in these kinds of situations from first-hand experience. Naruto then entered his main cabin and shut the door behind him. The Black Vein's captain's cabin was not too big but was more than enough for one. In fact, it was big enough for him and at least 7 people to live quite comfortable. The crew had seen the ship become his home, no matter what anyone would say to him, as his life was now one with the sea itself. He walked back to his desk and pulled the chair out to sit down and then removed his hat and placed it upon the desk, which was full of charts of the elemental nations. He then picked up a bottle of rum and took a quick drink and then looked at a picture of a young blonde-haired boy and a red-headed woman with green eyes and felt a bit of pain at what he was seeing and that he had worked so hard to put behind him, but could not forget what had been done to them both. As he reached over to pick up the picture and he accidentally hit the small crab-shaped music bow his mother had given him and listened to the song being played by it and felt his emotions take hold, including a single tear from his right eye, which he then touched it, bringing the small tear of salty water on his finger to see with his own eyes, and began to feel both pain and anger at the people who had taken so much from him in the first place. Haku finally worked up the courage to go talk to Suigetsu about the black foe, the former apprentice of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Turned to look at her as she walked up to him and gave a shark-like smile. "So what's on your mind?" She gave him one of those looks and curious about Naruto, or as you all call him, the black foe. "What can you tell me about him?" Suigetsu was a little taken aback by her question but decided to give her some information. "I can only tell you so much." "Well, how did you and that red-headed girl end up on this ship for starters, and how did he become what he is, and is he really so terrifying as people say?" Haku asked him. Suigetsu let out a small laugh and then began to tell her a somewhat abridged story. "I can tell you some things but not everything, okay?" She nodded to him as he then continued. "From what I know, he was 6 years old when something terrible happened to him in his home village that set him on this path. Some family friends who are very powerful, I might add, managed to get him out of that village and get him to his ancestral home." "You mean the Whirlpool village?" "I will neither confirm nor deny which village, but anyways, moving on. Once he got there, he began to training in the ways of the shinobi and eventually discovered his nation's unique maritime history, Including this ship, which he began to repair and refit so that it could sail once more. He also possesses some kind of bloodline that allows him to relive his ancestors' memories, including 2 of them who were notorious pirates in their days." Quote. Haku looked surprised at what Suigetsu had just told her and asked a question. "So he was experiencing his ancestors' memories?" "Oh, not just experiencing them but also gaining their skills as well. From the stories I've heard, by the time he was 10 years old he was already a master seaman and have trained in his other ancestral roots." She looked out upon the ship and then asked him her next question. "So how did you get involved with him?" He gave a small laugh as he made a course correction and then spoke. "That's an interesting story in its own right, so I'll give you an abridged version. Basically, he was already a pirate lord when he pulled up on one of Orochimaru's secret laboratories where me and Karen were being held against our will, and in my case already been experimented upon." He saw the look of shock upon her face and then continued his story. "What the snake wasn't counting on that day was that black foe decided to pay him a visit and rescued not only me and Karen but also a young girl named Isaribi, and an even bigger surprise when he met his sister who had been kidnapped before he was even born by the snake Sanin. Haku was surprised to hear this even more and realized that if she was going to get to know him better she would have to go through his family to do it. He has a sister. Oh yeah, he does. Just wait till you meet her. We will be at Shipwreck Cove in a couple of days and then you'll get to meet her firsthand. As soon as they were sure that their client was safe and sound from any more danger, the two Jonin and their squads quickly made their way back to their home village to give their report on what happened on the bridge. Kakashi had sent word ahead of them to prepare an emergency meeting with the Hokage and councils. One of the Anbu standing guard quickly opened the doors for them as they then entered the room to the council meeting for them and motioned them in with some urgency. The two Jonin senseis quickly entered the room as the door was shut behind them and gave a slight bow to the Hokage, or Fire Shadow as he was known to others, and began to give their report upon what had happened. The Council of Konoha for the most part was surprised that such a simple mission had become so dangerous for a newly made genin squad that also happened to include the Uchiha clan heir as well as another team that had to be dispatched to act as backup. But when Kurenai began to explain the confrontation on the bridge and just who had interfered, they were now on the edge of their seats and quite concerned. Kakashi was in the process of using his signature jutsu, the Chidori, to eliminate our opponent 1A rank threat level shinobi Zabuza Momochi, who was at this time contained until a person managed to stop Kakashi dead in his tracks just a few inches from both Zabuza and his young apprentice. We were able to identify this individual as the notorious pirate or privateer known as the Black Foe. Many of the civilian who were merchants were shocked to hear this, as their shipping companies have had run-ins with this man and only two of them who had done illegal things had reason to fear him. The others were quite happy for his help, since the water country navy had become more pirate than those they called pirate in the first place. The Shinobi Council knew that there was much more to come and that it would be something that would make this room just explode in noise and arguments amongst everyone, including the civilians. The ninja didn't have to wait long, as Kurenai then continued with her report. Zabuza's former employer at this time was the shipping tycoon Gato, who had decided to not pay him and ordered his execution as well as our own until one of the mercenaries recognized the Black Foe and pleaded for his life. However, Gato still did not believe that this was the pirate lord that he should be afraid of. They listened to everything she had to say with bated breath. Then the Black Foe's vessel appeared out of the fog bank off the bridge and opened fire upon the mercenaries, killing almost all of them. Several, however, did manage to engage the pirate lord and were quickly dispatched without even one of them able to touch him, except for this one man that grabbed a hold of his hood and pulled it down, which allowed us to later identify him, but not before he was able to finish off Gato. Everyone was listening to her story intently now and became more curious about who this pirate was. He then turned around to confront Zabuza and his apprentice, and only for us to become aware of his identity at that time. Kakashi was able to properly identify him as one Naruto Uzumaki. As soon as she said this, the room exploded in noise as everyone began to argue or talk amongst themselves. After just a minute, the third Hokage had enough of the arguing and made his presence known thanks to his ki and shouted for all to hear, "Enough." The third then turned his head as to the2 Jonin and spoke in a calm but commanding voice that only the village leader could produce. "You are positive that you have discovered the Uzumaki heir potential location and what activities he is now pursuing?" "Yes, sir," she said. "Has word of this gotten out to the village yet?" The third asked them, only to see them both looked at each other. The father of Ino then realized why they had looked at each other and spoke his mind. "You have Sakura Haruno on your team, don't you?" Kakashi could only nod as they then heard the third Hokage say, "Shit." The Willow Tree Tavern in the hidden AF village of Konoha was considered by many to be the most popular dining establishment and place of rest for the shinobi after a long mission. The Rookie Nine, as they were known, were together for the first time in weeks. Hinata and her teammate Kiba were busy bringing over several drinks and food to the table where the rookies and one member of Team Guy were currently seated. The member of Team GUY was none other than the only female member and weapons expert named Tenten. As the two sat down and passed out the food and drinks to everyone gathered, they then heard Ino start asking her questions. "Okay, forehead, what happened out there? I mean, you were supposed to be going on a C rank mission and then their team is sent out and I hear rumors it's like up to what now, like a B rank now?" Sakura was surprised that the rumors were somewhat true but decided that her and Kiba would set the record straight on their unique mission. "Actually, it's more like an A- rank pig. I think me and Kiba should just tell you all what happened on the mission." Everyone else got comfy as the two began to tell their tale, starting with Sakura. Well, it all started with a simple C-rank escort mission that we sent on to escort a master bridge builder back to his home village in Wave Country. After a day we eventually saw the middle of the road and realized it had not rained for a while. Everyone was thinking the same thing, genjutsu. And then these two missing nin suddenly just jumped right out of the puddle and went on the attack. At first we thought they had killed Kakashi-sensei and then went after the client. Fortunately for him, Sasuke and Sai managed to prevent them from getting to the client, and then it was revealed that our sensei had in fact faked his own death and then took them fast and then discovered what was really going on. Choji had become quite interested by their story and could not wait any longer, and then she continued her story. Well, we found out that our client had lied about the details of the mission and that it was in fact much more serious than we had first depicted it to be. We all agreed to continue the mission, but Kakashi-sensei sent for back Cup to arrive at the village only a little bit after we did. Everyone in the pub was now listening to the story with curiosity about what would happen next. So anyways, by the next day we finally made it to the island containing the village and were attacked by a mist ninja known as Zabuza. As soon as she said this, she heard people mumbling and talking amongst themselves and then saw the look on Tenten's face as she then said, "Your sensei fought one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, and from what I've heard one of the most dangerous members they ever had." Sakura just nodded her head as Ryon became even more curious and listened even more intently as she continued. Yeah, they fought like hell and eventually it looked like Zabuza was going to win as he had managed to capture Kakashi-sensei in a jutsu called the Water Prison, but luckily Sasuke and Sai put an emergency plan in action and managed to set him free. The shinobi in the tavern were actually quite impressed by the work of the two genin to save their sensei. Sakura then took a drink and continued her story. With that done, sensei then managed to defeat Zabuza, but before he could deliver the final blow to finish him off, we were interrupted by a fake hunter nin who put him in a false death-like state. After they disappeared, it was revealed that sensei had used up a lot of his chakra. We had to carry him to the client's house and hope for the reinforcements that had been sent, for which is where Kiba's story starts. Everyone turned from her to the young man and his dog, who then took a quick drink and started his part of the story. We arrived the next day to discover that since he had just regained consciousness and informed us that the threat was still alive and would probably re-engage us within a week. Both of our teachers ordered immediate training to prepare for the showdown. Tenten was now very interested about what was going to happen, as if she had dreamed when she was older about taking on one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist or even one of the 7 pirate lords. Kiba then took a bite of some of the food and another drink and continued with the story. So for that entire week we trained as hard as we could, but as it turns out we made one critical mistake when the week was up. One of the ninjas in the bar then had to ask him what it was. What was the mistake? We didn't think that the client's family was in any danger, but they were. If it wasn't for the appearance of the black foe, they probably would have been killed. As soon as he finished saying this, he saw just about everyone in the tavern was now looking at him with their mouths wide open, their eyes as big as dinner plates. One of the ninjas in the room shouted for all to hear. They met one of the most notorious pirates and lived. The two teams that had gone to Wave Country were still trying to learn as much as they could about the foe. Yes, he saved them. Now by this point Sasuke and Sai had gone up against the fake hunter nin, who had some weird bloodline that made these weird ice mirrors, and I might add kicked our asses good, while her sensei engaged Zabuza once more and was about to end him until the black foe popped up and stopped him dead in its tracks. Everyone was in shock at what they had just learned, but if you think that's weird, then get this. Zabuza's employer, a guy named Gato, then read at the other side of the bridge with a small army of mercenaries and basically betrayed them. However, he underestimated the foe, who then pointed off the bridge at this big black ship with black sails. Just came right out of this fog bank, and with one order from this guy opened up on the mercenary army, killing almost all of them in the process, and those who managed to get out of the killing zone went right at the foe, only for him to activate these strange blades on his arms and cut them down without even a thought. The room was so silent now you could hear a pin drop to the ground. Now one of them did manage to pull down this black hood he had on, but that didn't even slow them down. As he walked up to Gato, took out this strange weapon, shot him in his leg, and walked up to him again, taunted him and killed him right there for everyone to see. Sakura then decided to continue the story, but that's not all. As soon as he turned back to talk to Zabuza, our sensei let out a gasp as he recognized Edhu the Black Foe was and even attempted to take him down, but he escaped him thanks to those weird mirrors again and then reappeared on the deck of the ship. He then shouted for all of us to hear, "You almost captured Captain Naruto Uzumaki." Quote, the sounds of items hitting the ground like beer mugs surprised all of them as they looked about the room and everyone who was present. However, it was Tenten who broke the silence. "Are you kidding me?" They were surprised by her statement as she then continued, "You're telling us that one of the most dangerous, powerful and notorious pirate lords is from his village and has been missing for over a decade." Ino and her team were surprised by this bit of information as Tenten then continued, "If what you say is the truth, then this village and country will stop at nothing to get their hands on him again. I mean, he's pretty much a noble and is the heir to an entire country." The rookies then heard older ninjas not that far from them then say, "I don't blame the kid for running away from this village. After all, when your only family is killed right in front of you and the village does absolutely nothing to give you justice, would you want to stay here?" A lot of the ninjas quickly paid their bills and ran out of the pub to spread the word about what they had just heard. The Black Vein had just pulled into the main docking area of Shipwreck Cove. Haku and Zabuza were absolutely impressed with what they had seen so far as the ship pulled into its dock, only to look on out upon the bay, shocked to see 3 man-of-wars with the Water Country emblems on them, but also the emblem of the resistance upon them as well, and realized that Mei was undoubtedly here waiting for them. The two of them then followed Naruto, his cousin, and Suigetsu off the ship and into a rather busy-looking tavern that was called the Red Sailor. The tavern was so active that it had 3 bouncers who looked like they have seen several wars. But the moment they saw Naruto and his entourage, they let them pass without a fuss and even nodded to them in a show of respect and then went back to their jobs. As they entered the tavern, a young red-headed woman then motioned for them to follow her up some stairs. They were also being guarded. Zabuza and Haku were actually shocked to see Mei and the new daimyo of Water Country sitting at a table with 3 other people who Naruto instantly recognized and walked over to them along with the young red-headed woman. The Mei then said, "Well, I see we still have 4 living mariner lords among us, and I see that the old foe has brought you back to us, Zabuza." Zabuza nodded his head to her and then said, "Well, I'm just happy that you sent him to get me in time, for me and my apprentice here would have holes in our chest right now." Mei gave a smile and turned her head to look Naruto right in the eyes and then said, "Nifraid, there is more I must ask of you and the others here as well." This caught Naruto's attention as she then continued, "Now, as you may or may not be aware, the Chunin Eames will be held in the Hidden Leaf Village within the net 9 days, and I would like for you and your 2 officers here as well as our team to enter the Eam under the flag of the Hidden Mist Village to represent both us and Water Country as a whole. The red-headed woman and the 4 mariner lords are pirate lords as the rest of the LD had come to call them just looked at her as if her head was off her body. At first she didn't know what to think about their reactions as they were all quiet with their mouths open until all 5 of them started to point their fingers at her in an accusing manner in saying things that went against her plan. From both Naruto and the red-headed woman, who was revealed to be his older sister Tayuya, said, "Are you out of your damn mind?" The net lord to speak out was none other than Jack Webb. "Why the hell are you sending him into that hellhole of a village, and for what?" The net was a woman with a simple outfit on that looks like it would prove effective against cold weather but not a hindrance in warmer weather. Her name was Minerva the Ice Queen. "I will not let you sacrifice one of us for your damn plan, woman." The final lord was a dark-skinned woman with white face paint over the top of her face that brought out a skull-like appearance but still revealed her absolute beauty with long, flowing black hair and a unique hat on her head. She was known as Lady Rouge, the Voodoo Queen of Lightning. "Can we just shoot this woman right now and be done with it for her stupid and crazy idea?" Now, while Mei was feared by just about everyone and could basically intimidate any man with a simple smile and a sweet word about their death, but she was absolutely terrified by the Mariner Lord's beck. She could not intimidate them at all. She had expected some of this to occur and had to e-plane her plane to them to get them to side with her as well as to finish while she was here in Shipwreck Cove. Now all of you allow me to e-plane why I have asked Naruto and his crew to do this, but first." She then walked over to the table and brought out the remains of a sword which get all of their attention, including "Before I can e-plane my plan to you all, I have to perform my duty here." They instantly recognized the blade as belonging to one of their fallen lords. He chose Yuya to be the Net Mariner Lord to take his place as the Lord of the Crescent Moon Sea. The four current Mariner Lords motioned for her to follow them as they eyed the tavern and then walked a bit to a small blacksmith shop that seemed to be quite revered by the many people present. They then motioned for Yuya to enter along with Mei, who was still holding the broken blade in its bow. The man in the shop stepped forward and picked up the handle part of the sword and then put it into Yuya's hands, only to see it glowing bright, burning her hand in the process. At the same time the hilt of the blade burned her hand. The other four Mariner Lords felt their own marks burned just as it had when they had been made Lords of the Seas. The old blacksmith motioned for his apprentice to come forward and then said to her, "The previous lord and the blade have chosen you and find you worthy to wield this blade and the responsibilities, but because it is broken it must be made new, and I will require something you hold dear to make the blade anew." Yuya reached into her pocket and pulled out her first flute, which had been given to her by her mother. It was gold and silver with the whirlpool symbol embedded in it, and handed it over to the smith, who then nodded to her and went to work. The Mariner Lords listened to the sounds of the blacksmith as well as the seven swordsman member was Preza. As this man or myth was the one responsible for their blade's creation and maintenance, and knew that his apprentice would also follow in this man's footsteps. After a few hours the smith returned with a brand new blade and a set of hidden blades made from the broken remnants of the last Mariner Lord. Yuya took hold of the blade and held it up for all to see. The hilt had a small flute built in to it, as the blade was in perfect silver with a crescent moon built into it. It seemed to radiate the light of the moon itself as the other Mariner Lords each revealed their own blades, and each said, "I, Captain Jack Webb, Lord of the Waters Country Coast, hereby recognize you as one of us." The Net was a woman who looked ready for cold weather. "I, Minerva, Lord of the Snow Seas, recognizes you as one of us." Then it was the Net girl's turn. "I, Lady Rouge of the Lightning Seas, hereby recognizes you as one of us." Then it was her brother's turn to speak. "I, Naruto Uzumaki, Lord of the Whirlpool Seas, hereby recognizes you as one of a sister." She held the blade and got a good look at it, as well as putting on the blades of her assassin heritage, and then said for all those present to hear, "I, Yuya Uzumaki, hereby accept the position of Mariner Lord of the Crescent Moon Seas." All five of them then sheathed their swords and turned to Mei, who then motioned for them to follow her, as she then said, "Now that is done, at least let me explain why I need your help in this matter. Who knows, you might actually enjoy it. I was personally wondering if this chapter would be bigger than the last one. Ugly. I was happy to see that it was, but I have to admit, while no major action of any kind happened, I did get to dive into a bit of some of the characters' histories. While I may have created some more questions than answers, I at least did all I could to create a few brand new avenues, and I want to hear what you all think about the Mariner Lords or Pirate Lords. There are still two other Mariner Lords to appear later in the stores. I would like to hear your ideas on who these should be. I also in the Net chapter hope to go a little further into Naruto's past as well as the other lords as well as to start the part of the story, but we'll have to wait and see. I also plan to do a couple of bingo book profiles at the end of some of the chapters on the Mariner Lords, and to show that there is more going on in the story than you might think, but I want to hear what you think is going to happen. Please read and review. Mei had poured herself a drink and then turned to the Mariner Lords and began to explain everything. "Now, as you are all aware, the war cost us all greatly in the long run. The council and myself have decided that we need to make a good impression to potential clients, and the only place to do that quickly is in the Chunin Eames, which are being held in the Hidden Leaf." Naruto had just taken a shot of rum and then said, "I can understand your desire to impress potential clients, but why the hell do you need us?" Quote. Mei could only roll her eyes at his comment. "Because out of the entire Mariner Lords that I know of, you and many of your crew are the only ones with significant shinobi training." Lady Rouge nodded her head at this. "Okay, that I can understand, but why is it so important to send them in?" "Glad you asked that one, Rouge. It's because he is the only one here who knows the village inside and out," Mei said to them as she pointed at Naruto. Naruto and his two female relatives looked at each other and then back at Mei, as he then said, "Okay, what the hell is going to happen?" "Fire Country," she finished saying, and then noticed all of them looking at each other. "The Chunin Eames," they all said at the same time. The Water Daimyo had for the most part been quiet, but now had to just say something. "Okay guys, that was just creepy the way you all did that." Yuya just smiled as she then said, "It looks like we finally get our chance to give a little payback to the snake freak." Naruto nodded his head and smiled to her and then said, "Wouldn't it be better if it was 2 teams going instead of just 1? The third Hokage now sat in a chair in an emmer. Gensi military, none other than the fire daimyo himself, who had just read the report. Needless to say, he was not a happy man at all, so as I am to understand this gentleman, one of the most notorious pirate lords as our enemy call him, and his fellow mariner lords, and you now tell me that he is in fact one Naruto Uzumaki who disappeared from your village at the age of 6 years and shortly after the death of his mother." The third Hokage then said, "Yes my lord, we only became aware of this a short time ago thanks to a mission to Wave Country and its village." The fire daimyo nodded his head and then turned to his admiralty. "I have asked several times for you all to issue safe harbor licenses for them to use without the land of water finding out about this, and now we find that one of them was in fact born in our lands and hold the rights to an entire country and is quite possibly the only one that can even find it. And you told me that they were quite possibly an enemy." The admiralty remained quiet as some of them had argued that same point but had been shot down by the older members and some of the younger members who had been intimidated by the mariner lords and what they were capable of. The fire daimyo then turned to his senior analyst and asked, "What is the information that we have on the black foe?" One of the admirals who had tried to support the mariner lords in their fight against tyranny decided to give his report and opened a large file containing the information. "All of our files and information that we have on the black foe or Naruto Uzumaki is very limited at best. We can't even give you a proper rundown on his ship other than the fact that it is perhaps a frigate with least 40 long-range cannons aboard and that it is, for the lack of a better word, pitch black from the hull to the canvas sails." Quote, the fire daimyo then asked, "What of his personal combat capabilities?" The same admiral then continued with another report, "Like all pirates he does use fire RMS, but they are very loud and not effective in our hidden villages area of Ipertais, but from what we do know he has an impressive array of other skills including ninjutsu and is a known sword master." A civilian who had traveled with the third Hokage to this summit then spoke, "I can vouch for that as I saw him in action myself. It was about 2 years ago and my ship the Lunar was en route to the Crescent Moon Kingdom to deliver a shipment of Fire Country sake." Everyone was listening to his statement with intensity as he then continued, "As is common among our merchant guilds, we made sure to stay as far away from the border of Water Country due to the civil war at the time. However, we were intercepted by a Water Nation naval vessel that claimed we were in their territorial waters and for us to surrender or die. We decided to make a run for it knowing that we were still within international waters at the time and were fired upon us, which killed 7 members of the crew with the first volley they fired at us." Everyone was now surprised that this event had occurred and had not reached this council in the first place. They then prepared to board us by force, but before they could even say foot on our deck we heard the sound of cannon fire. Their primary deck was ripped apart by the cannon shot. We then saw this black ship come right out of the fog and ram them head on. I then saw all of these men and women who then come aboard the enemy ship's main deck and started to fight all of the Water Nation troops aboard. I saw the 3 senior officers of this ship cutting them down like they were nothing at all in the world. The one I later found out who was the black foe wasted no time making his way up to their command deck. One of the admirals who had a unique set of scars upon his face then spoke. "Can you describe his personal fighting style?" The entire room was now listening and recording everything he said. "He was faster than anyone I have ever seen and cut them down like they were nothing to him. Then in one moment he dove behind one of his opponents and brought his sword back, cutting the man in 2 at the waist, and began to dodge projectiles while slicing and dicing his way to the bridge of the ship. We then watched him literally do something with his blade that made it split into 2 and then cut down the remainders of the officers who attempted to move the ship away from his vessel. He then ran his hand through his hair and continued his story. The black foe then separated us from the Water Country ship and told us to head to our destination and that they would stay in the area. Hunting any more violated the rules of the international waters. He had even had his crew repaired the damage to our vessel as they then returned to their ship and moved back into the fog. We then heard some kind of sound coming from the damaged water bus and saw that the black foe had left the captain alive only to watch the ship and its treacherous crew literally be pulled down into the water by some unknown means. One of the admirals was surprised by this statement. "What do you mean it was pulled down?" I'm saying that it looked like it had been grabbed by something and Br. Okay and into in the center of the ship and then pulled down to the watery depths or to Davy Jones's lock. The civilian said as everyone was trying to process this new information. The fire daimyo was surprised by everything that he had heard and decided to make his decision in ruling on the subject. Based upon what information I have and what has been gathered for me, I hereby decree that we are to leave the black foe alone and attempt to at least convince him to return to his home, which is us. I will also try to gain information from the land of water through diplomatic means if possible. We must approach everything with him cautiously, as I will not be responsible for an international incident involving him, and neither will any of you, including you, Admiral Scarlet. Admiral Scarlet was the man with 3 claw marks or scars upon his face who had some personal history with the Uzumaki clan. Just nodded his head to the daimyo but was absolutely furious with his leader and clutched his little red cross, even drawing blood in the process from his hatred of them. The 5 Mariner Lords' ships were busy pulling in every single piece of equipment and cargo they could carry as they prepared to head out to the land of fire for their mission. Naruto walked to one of the 3 men of wars with his 2 first mates at his side. Once I'm done with the water daimyo and I will be popping back on board the ship once we are en route. Get all the cargo you can stored below decks and have the crew stay at battle stations until we make it to the land of fire. The 2 of them quickly nodded and boarded the ship, barking out orders as Naruto could only smile at their antics, and boarded the man of war that was named Redemption. One of the crew members saw him and escorted him below decks to the war room that had been set up, and entered only to see the other lords standing before a large table at the center of the room with both the daimyo and Mei were waiting for him. To the surprise of everyone, he also bought a small container which housed several sea charts of the land of fire's coastline. Naruto and Tayuya then walked up to the war table and looked Mei right in the eyes as she then spoke. Now, as you are all aware, almost every one of the major villages except for ours and the land of Wind's hidden village has a stadium that is used for the Chunin EAMS once a year. What ideal the village realizes is that this is the perfect opportunity for Orochimaru to not only gain entry to the village but also launch a surprise attack upon the village itself. Naruto and his sister were surprised but also impressed by the ingenuity of the snake's plan. The Chunin EAMS are a perfect opportunity for him to attack, but it's something that none of the normal villages would even remotely consider doing because of the financial risk that is at play here. The other Mariner Lords were curious about his statement, as he then said to them, the EAMS in their own right are sometimes they work, but they are also an opportunity for all of the villages participating to gain future clients and to promote their genin to the net rank. So for any of them to even consider a sneak attack on another village's EAMS would be seen as potential suicide, as you might lose both respect and trust as well as potential clients by doing so. Jack nodded and then said, and we all know that while the snake now has a village of his own, he still operates outside of normal laws and will not hesitate to cripple his old village even at the destruction of his own if need be. Chiyuya nodded her head and then said, you're right, except he's not stupid and will try to keep the village going no matter what. But he's also a realist too, and if he doesn't do something to the land of fire to hurt them as well, they will just rebuild the hidden leaf and all of his scheming will be for nothing, so he has to deal with the Grande Fire Fleet as well. The water daimyo then spoke, we have also obtained information that the land of Rice, where his ninja village is located, has been absorbing some of our renegade navy that we are still hunting at this time, which makes any attack upon the land of fire with any OFs present an act of war with them as well. Lady Rouge could not help but smile. So when the time comes to attack, we strike them at their heart. That's why you wanted all of us to come. The daimyo nodded her head and then spoke. That is correct, my Lady Rouge. The Water Council would only allow me to spare 3 of our brand new dreadnoughts for this operation and are keeping the rest close to home just in case any of the rogues decided to start a surprise attack upon us. That is where you all come in, as you are extremely experienced sailors and warriors as well as warships are heavily armed for these kinds of engagements. Naruto then unsealed the charts and presented them on the table for all to see, including the Water Fleet Admiral, who was an old friend, and said, when we arrive at land of fire we should anchor here near this military base, which is the only logical choice for the snake to attack, because without this main base it would be a very long time for the fire navy to recover, if any at all. We can also set up anchor in this part of the bay, which will give us plenty of room to maneuver and keep us far away from the Fire Navy so that they do not see us as a threat. Minerva was curious about his statements. Why this military base? He pointed at the charts and said, this is their primary military base and it also has their dry docks and shipyards as well as supple. Why lines for both the fleet and their hidden village? The young man nodded his head and asked, I'll need a copy of these charts so that we may enter the harbor according. Naruto nodded his head to him and continued his questions. I know from personal experience that the Konoha will take upwards of 6 weeks to complete with a month-long preparation for the final aim, but to complete we need 3 members on each team and a sensei, so, who is going to be our senseis? To answer his question, the door opened to reveal 2 members of the 7 swordsmen that made the Black Foe smile. Oh yeah, I'm taking fish face. Sasuke Uchiha had been walking all over the village from one weapons shop to another trying to find the strange weapons he had seen the Black Foe use that day on the bridge. So far he had had no luck, as every one of them were surprised by the request and were even more surprised when they learned this was a weapon that was used by Uzumaki. There was only one weapon shop T. Hat he knew might specialize in EOTIC weapons, as all the shop owners had called it, as he walked up to the shop called the 10 Blades and realized that this might be his only hope of finding this strang weapon that could help him in his quest for revenge. He then entered the shop and looked around the shop and its impressive merchandise, only to see Tenten standing behind the counter a little bit out ways working on a set of daggers that were currently being claimed and maintenance. He then walked up to the counter and made some noise to get her attention. Tenten turned around and saw the Uchiha Ire standing at her family's counter waiting patiently for her to serve him. May I help you with something, Sasuke? He nodded his head and then spoke. You might be the only shop that can help me find what I'm looking for. Many of the other shops all told me that the weapon I'm looking for either doesn't exist or is very EOTIC and that they are not given for producing it. Many of them recommended your weapon store. This caught her attention as she stopped the maintenance work she was currently doing and walked into the back of the shop and yelled out for her father, Dad, I got a special commission up here. As she returned to the front counter, Sasuke then heard heavy footsteps approaching from the back room, only to see a C2 man with an eye patch on his left eye with a heavy scar over said eye and a slight limp to his walk. The man took one look at Sasuke and then spoke in a somewhat deep voice, All right young man, what's this special order you be wanting? Sasuke then began to apply what he had seen to the shop owner, doing everything he could to remember every detail about the strange blades and even some of the Black Foe's movements, hoping that they would help in identifying weapon and that he could hopefully make one. The shop owner, however, was taken aback by the young Uchiha's request and description and put his finger up, signaling just a moment, and walked back to a book with a strange symbol that looked like the letter A upon it, and opened it to a particular page and put it in front of his potential client and then spoke with confidence, Is this what you seek? Sasuke's eyes widened as he then said, That's the weapon that he was using, can you make it? The shop owner then noticed even his daughter seemed to be drooling over the prospect of this strange weapon, and then decided to give both of them the bad news. I'm afraid that this particular weapon may be just a little too EOTIC even for my shop, as while I am aware of their since I do not know any of IR internal workings to recreate one of them. The two of them were surprised by his statement as he then continued, Believe me, if I could make one I would have long ago, but this is an assassin weapon. This weapon is where the term a blade in the crowd came from. It is extremely effective in quick assassinations, but in the right hands it can be an aggressive hand-to-hand combat weapon as well. I inquire how you came about the description of this weapon. This surprised both of them as Sasuke then began his explanation. It happened on the mission to Wave Country and I saw it being used by the notorious pirate the Black Foe. Tenten's father then closed the book and pointing to the symbol upon it and asked, Did he have this symbol anywhere on his body? Sasuke nodded his head, so some of them still exist. The two of them were surprised by his statement as he then explained. The weapons are called hidden blades and are one of the most formidable weapons that are used by the Assassin Brotherhood, but they were thought to be ETINCT thanks to the last great shinobi war. These weapons were very rare anyways and only issued to assassins. This pirate or privateer, as I think he really is probably the one of the last in Isance and probably Etreme well trained and probably the only one who would know if there are any more of them in Isance or if the plans to create them have survived. So I have to go find a pirate to get me one of these weapons. I'm afraid so. There are however knockoffs, but they are nowhere near the standards of these weapons, and that is one of the reasons why no one wants them at all. I don't even carry them for that very reason, the shop owner said as he held the book close. Sasuke then asked the shop owner another question. Could you create a pair of them for me if I got you the plans? It's possible, but I need to see them to know for certain. Like I said, these are very complicated weapons, and I'm doing so. Yes, if you can get the plans and pay for it, I'll make a set, he said. Sasuke could only smile as he now had a new objective. Scarlet had grabbed a bottle of his favorite drink and walked into his private booth only to be shocked to see one of his comrades already sitting there in the darkness with his singular red Sharingan lightly glowing in the darkness. Scarlet then sat down and put the bottle in front of him as he then said to his fellow comrade in arms, "What are you doing here? Is that any way to greet an old friend, Scar?" The stranger said. Scarlet growled a bit and then said in a harsh tone, "Don't you dare call that. You should have killed her when you had the chance and not used her to set that damn foe free upon that village. You set every single one of our plans back years by doing that." The stranger gave a slight laugh. "Oh, like going to kill his mother and then losing one of our biggest prizes, which we now find out is one of our biggest problems to date, and it's all thanks to you, Scar." Scarlet T. Hen took a big drink of his liquor and then said, "Oh, I would like to take credit for that, but I honestly can't. All I do know is that it is someone among us who did that deed. I was in that village that day on other business just like you." Quote, "The red glowing eye narrowed somewhat. So you are telling the truth. I'd be lying if I said I didn't believe you." Scarlet then took another drink and touched his face, remembering the past, and decided to attend to present matters. "So why are you here?" "To give you a much needed warning, and I was thinking of not to, but now what the hell, our former friend. The snake will be attacking the village and Fire Harbor during the finals of the EAMS." The stranger said. Scarlet could only smile as he then said, "So I'm supposed to be on a training mission with my personal fleet during this time?" "Yes, this will give him the ammunition he needs to take more power without our enemies even knowing, and weakening the Leaf Village in the process as well as the Land of Wind in the process. Let's have a few more drinks and then discuss things of the future." The stranger smiled at his comrade in arms and then said, "Oh yes, let's. May the Father of Understanding guide us." Scarlet cheered his comrade and then said, "May the Father of Understanding guide us." The two of them then devoured their drinks and set them on the table next to a set of blood-red crosses and a small document bearing the words East India Trading Company. End of C3. That's the new chapter. Please tell me what you think. And yes, there will be elements of Pirates of the Caribbean, but also it will still take place predominantly in the Naruto universe with strong elements from the Assassin's Creed universe as well. I also want to hear what you all think about the new characters and LSO who are the senseis for the two mist teams. Please read and review. Naruto walked along the deck of his ship, observing his crew going about their duties as they sailed to the land of fire. He however heard groaning coming from his newest crew member. "Oh, suck it up, fish face." The man in question was as blue as the sea itself, with what looked like gills on his cheeks and shark-like teeth. He then looked up at him in an almost pleading manner. "How much longer do I have to do this?" Naruto then made a face and turned to look at some of his crew and asked aloud, "Gentlemen and ladies, how much longer does he have to do this?" The men and women who were busy repairing a section of the ship's railing looked at the blue-skinned man with contentment and then said, "We will be done in a couple of hours, sir." Naruto then turned back to his newest crew member and sensei and then said with a smile, "Well, it looks like you'll be done once we reach the land of fire by this evening, Kisame." Kisame felt like groaning as he then said, "You do know it was an accident, right? Tell that to my crew that has to defy the damage you did, fish face, and besides I warned you to watch where you point that sword of yours, and as we all know you didn't listen to me," he said. The blue swordsman as he walked away could only be heard complying that it was an accident and that he had no intention of doing it again. Once Naruto reached the command deck over his quarters, he noticed his cousin fighting back the laughter at the scene before her as one of the most feared swordsmen doing deck hand work aboard the Black Vein. "Karen, if you're going to laugh, just get it over with already. He's embarrassed enough as it is." As soon as she heard this, she just couldn't hold it in anymore and laughed after about a minute. She stopped herself and then looked over to the Black Vein's sister ship the Faulkner and wondered about the other 7 swordsman member they had aboard. how do you think Zabuza is doing over their cousin? Naruto looked over at his vessel's sister's ship and then pulled out his spyglass and looked over and just smiled as he then said, a lot better than ours. Chiyuya, Isaribi and Haku were fighting together as a team against their new sensei Zabuza Momochi, who was now a newly reinstated member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. The crew of the Faulkner watched the practice battle with astonishment. Zabuza then motioned for them to stop as he caught his breath and was actually quite impressed since this team would require the most work. He then watched as the team took a much-needed break as they observed him looking out upon the small fleet. Chiyuya then locked up alongside him and said, "You look deep in thought, Zabuza." He nodded his head to her and then said, "I am. I was so concerned that this plan will not work at all, but I'm happy to see that I was wrong about that." "That's good to hear, Sensei. Can I ask you another question?" She then saw him nod his head. "Do you know how to sail a ship? One of the requirements for being a good mist shinobi, especially one of the Seven Swordsmen, is that you both know how to swim very well and how to sail a ship. Need less to say I got very good at swimming at that part, and of course being a swordsman." He stopped for a moment as if reflecting on his past. "But I unfortunately never got the some level of appearance to be a good sailor, I am afraid. I know what I'm doing, I just don't have the necessary appearance. I would like to be proficient at it," he said with a sense of both pride and disappointment at the last part. She then nodded to him and had to ask a question, "Do you think we have a shot at passing the EAM?" "I do. Just don't let your desire for revenge against both the snake and whoever was responsee for your mother's death cloud your judgment, my student," he said to her. "Believe me, I know how you feel since I had to watch so many of my friends with bloodlines are murdered by the fourth Mizukage. Even though I have planned for months, I was still unable to kill and had to flee, but what really makes me angry was find out later that she was nothing more than a puppet for someone to use just because what he held," Zabuza said with a bit of anguish in his voice. Chiyuya could only nod her head as she remembered what her tenant had told her and then said to him, "Well, if their original plan was to try to take the three-tailed turtle, they failed." "What do you mean?" "When me and my brother fought him, we were able to defeat him and unfortunately led to his death. However, we resealed OLD3 inside of me so they won't be to get a hold of him 2.5 years from now," she said to him. Even behind the bandages he just smiled as he knew that there was no way for the stranger with the red eye to control an Uzumaki. Their only option would be to forcibly remove it from her and her brother, which would be a very difficult operation in the future, and he did not pity them one bit. The Grand Fire Nation Navy Fleet Yard and base known as Fini Nest was as calm as could be. They had already welcomed several foreign ships that were here for the Chunin Eames into their harbors with absolutely no problems whatsoever. One of the tenants looked out only to see 8 ships off in the distance and pulled out his look only to run to his commanding officer with a look of both shocked and potential fear upon his face at what he had just seen. The young officer then ran into the officers' lounge and quickly shouted out for all to hear, "You, sir, a group of water country warships have just entered the outer areas of the harbor." The young officer watched the room become a site of action as the senior officers made a mad dash to the upper observance areas of the fort and quickly pulled out their spy glasses only to be surprised to see 3 heavy warships and 5 frigates that looked like they could do some serious damage. One of the officers, who was known as a master of arms, "We begin to observe the ships and their armament as well as their country of origin," and then spoke to his commanding officers, "Sir, I have never seen ships like these before. They have got to be packing at least over 60 guns on just one broadside alone. Are you saying that they are even more well armed than them our men of wars?" The commander asked. "These ships look like they have seen battles, sir, and yes, I do believe they are more armed than us. However, it is the 5 smaller ships that are of the frigate class I'm concerned with more." "What do you mean?" the commander asked with curiosity in his voice. "I believe they are the pirate lord vessels, sir, and I managed to see his name on one of them, sir." "It's his ship, sir. It's the Black Veen," the master of arms said, seeing the look of shock on everyone's face. One of the other officers had his spyglass trained on the ships and then noticed that they were signaling the fort. "Sir, they are signaling us." The commanding officer quickly pulled out his spyglass and pointed towards the water country ships and was surprised by what he was seeing. "I think they're here for the Chunin Eames." The master at arms read the message and said aloud for all to hear, "Fini Nest." We are the protection and diplomatic party representing the water daimyo of water country here to reopen trade negotiations with your land as well as for our shinobi to see. Ompit in the current shunin eames and request permission to negotiate, may we come ashore. The senior officer then turned to one of his men said, do we have an ambassador here? Yes sir, he is currently in the town. Informed him to immediately come to the board as there will be diplomatic matters to be discussed and grant them permission to come ashore with full military honors as well. He sighed. D as his officers immediately signaled back to the water ships and went to work preparing everything for their arrival. May Jack and the water daimyo herself all eyed the longboat entering the foe. Nest fort for the negotiations to take place. Alongside them were a group of highly trained water marines as well as the two ambassadors who looked as rough and tough as well as they were presentable. They then entered a small well-lit room with many Fire Nation sailors presenting their swords in a show of respect. The small group then approached a table and sat down with both May and Jack talking. G up positions directly behind them in case of any trouble. The ambassador for the Land of Fire had already been briefed on certain factors including the matter regarding the black foe and decided to take things very carefully. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming to our country and to compete in the EAMS, but I must ask out of curiosity, why do you choose to, and now when you could ha? They waited for another eam to occur later on. The two water ambassadors and the water daimyo herself were actually quite experienced in the realm of negotiations and were not surprised by this question. That is actually quite simple really. Your stadium as well as this time of year are perfect to host the EAMS and is considered one of the best times for any nation or village to compete in the EAMS. ND despite just coming out of a war we are still quite experienced in the shinobi areas, if you get my meaning. So you have a team entering the EAMS? The fire ambassador asked. She just smiled at him and then said, no, we have two teams entering the EAMS. It would have been three but there since he felt they were not yet ready and wait for the net EAMS later this year. But we needed these two teams. Would not want to wait as they are quite experienced and should have received a field promotion, but this was much more efficient and would promote more interaction with foreign ninja. The fire ambas. Adore was surprised by the statement but continued on, knowing that this might actually help their own country as well. Very well, I see no reason they can't not eat. However, what do you mean by opening trade negotiations? I mean just that, as you know, the Land of Water is made up of many different islands, both sea and snow, and our economy has recently begun to boom and we are in need of customers sell our wares to. We would also like to open trade with other nations for some of their EOTIC materials and things, and knowing how many people come through your land, we are hoping that you would allow us to set up a trading post here. In fact, I have already sent someone had to buy the very large plot of land to act as our trading and e-port embassy for our many businesses and jobs until they can purchase land and ports as well. The water daimyo said to them with a clear intention that they had already put a lot of thought into it and had quite a bit of fun with their reactions. Well, if you wish to build your embassy on those lands that you have already purchased, there is nothing we can do to stop you, but would also like to know if we can help in any way. The fire ambassador said, hoping to get an opening he could use later. The two water ambassadors and their daimyo looked at each other and then turned back to the fire messenger as one of the water ambassadors then said, not at this time, sir. We have brought plenty of supplies to begin building both the embassy and the ports necessary for our livelihood, but we thank you for the offer. The fire ambassador was little taken aback by this but went on to the net subject that he knew what needed to be discussed. Very well, I can understand that. However, as one area of expertise I would like to discuss with you about a particular individual. I know that you are referring to Captain Naruto Uzumaki. What matters do you wish to discuss with him? We wish to try to convince him to return home here in the Land of Fire. The fire ambassador said. Jack whirled his eyes and then spoke under his breath, catching the fire ambassador's attention, who then asked him, I was unaware that this matter would be any of your concern, sir. My name is Captain Jack Webb, sir, pirate lord of the water seas and a good friend to Captain Uzumaki. The fire ambassador then turned to the water daimyo and asked her, I was unaware that a pirate lord like yourself would even be in her services, sir. Quote, the water daimyo then gave the fire ambassador a rather cold look. I would be very careful about your net words if I were you, ambassador. Captain Webb has recently been reinstated as a water country officer in our meeting and will silk team to hold his position as a mariner lord, or as you call them, pirate lords. The fire officers as well as the ambassador felt the coldness innate in her voice and realized that the pirate lords were a touchy subject with them. The investor quickly changed the subject back to Uzumaki, and we will remember that, my lady. However, we must have an opportunity to speak with Lord Uzumaki. It is not my decision if he will talk with you but his own, and just to let you know he is also a mariner lord as well and has diplomatic immunity thanks to his years of service to the rebellion and the new water country government. She said to him, catching his reaction, that things have not gone as planned for them and that these talks would go on for a little bit. It had been almost an hour when the water daimyo and her escort party returned to the water nation ships to deliver the news about the negotiations. Naruto Taiui and they senseis watched as she walked up to them with a clear bit of news. Well, you two, The two of them looked at her with curiosity as Naruto then asked, and what would that news be? Well, first off, the Chunin Eames will begin tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the village's Shinobi Academy. Now here are your headbands and the papers to dissipate in the EAMS. Please sign them and have your team M. Atesh sign theirs as well and then present them when you enter the EAM at the front of the academy, the water daimyo said as she then handed them their papers and then decided to explain more about her negotiation. The water daimyo then sat on one of the railings of the ship and then said to the two Uzumakis, the two embassies have been agreed to, so we will need to unpack all the cargo from the ships to begin construction on the harbor embassy first. However, allow me to inform you too of the wishes of the fire government. Naruto could only imagine what this was about and just had to ask, what do they want? They want you to return to the Leaf Village, however they are unaware of you to Yuya. Naruto looked at his sister and then gave a devilish smile and then said, it will be nearly possible to keep this quiet once we enter the EAM. We will deal with them when the time comes, but I would recommend getting the Shinobi ambassador and the embassy constructed as soon as possible to prepare for the fallout. Yuya nodded to her brother and then said her mind as well, I agree, we'll do with it when it comes, but for the moment we should get back to our ships and get everything ready for tomorrow. It would be a 40 minutes journey to the village if we walk by foot, so I recommend we go before sunrise. Naruto said to everyone as they nodded their heads and went about their business to prepare for the next day. The sea air was cool and comfortable. The morning of the Chunin Eames were to start, with still 2 hours before sunrise. The crews of the Water Nation ships were still busy floating the cargo for the construction of the embassy. Inside his cabin, Naruto was busy finishing his outfitting for the EAM this morning but couldn't help but what was going to happen to this day as he heard a knock at his cabin door. After opening the cabin door, he saw his cousin Karen and first mate Suigetsu walked into the cabin and instantly saw him putting the finishing touches on his outfit and equipment as he then turned to them and said, I hope you two are prepared for this. Karen nodded her head and said, yeah, I'm outfitted for an entire week. Why, may I ask you had us do this? Because if they have not changed too much of the EAM, then second part will take place in the Forest of Death and should take up to about 5 days to complete. He said to them. Suigetsu couldn't help but feel excited about showing off his skills against other shinobi. He then noticed his captain walking forward and motioned for them to follow him out of the cabin and onto the main desk and said, she will be here when you get back, Naruto. Quote, he gave a nod to them as he lightly touched the rail and then put his hood back up and walked over to their sensei, who happy to no longer be doing manual labor aboard the Black Vein. Kisame then positioned himself to walk down the side of the ship into the longboat with his students following right behind him. Despite what many might have thought about him, Kisame had in fact trained all 3 of them at one time or another without his former organization knowing about it, as well as giving the rebellion pieces of information to use against the rogue water government. However, he would not willingly tell anybody that he was quite in fact scared of the black foe after accidentally seeing the man's cousin and sister in the bathhouse that one time. The hum and shark, as some have called him, still had nightmares about that day. He turned to look at the 3 of them as though longboat moved quietly through the early morning with another longboat with 4 people in it as well heading towards the beach to begin their journey to the Hidden Leaf. The 2 Chunin had arrived early for their shift at the guard gate and couldn't help but feel that today would be one of those days. And any thought about how boring this day would be for them being friends. Saw 8 people walking up to the gate and presented papers for the Chunin Eames. Now, while this was unusual in itself, the fact that the 2 senses were members of the 7 swordsmen of the mist were, the fact that they saw both Zabuza and Kisame walking right into their village on their way to He Academy was more than enough to surprise them to no end. Did you just see that? His friend could only nod in disbelief as he watched the mist group walk deeper into the village. Even the Anbu W. Ho were in hiding could not help but stare in disbelief at who had just entered the village and looked at one another wondering what was about to happen and how bloody would this year's EAM really be. The first destination for the two teams was the Silver Leaf Hotel, where all the foreign dignitaries and competitors in the EAM would be staying for the duration of the Chunin EAMs. After securing the IR rooms, they then made their way to the Shinobi Academy and ran up the tree that gave them an excellent view of the teams that will be entering the EAMS. Naruto and his team, as well as his sisters Wat, Ched, as many groups entered. However, it was when the Sand team entered that he felt something was wrong, and especially as he looked at an old friend and quickly activated his eagle vision to look at the back of her neck and let out a small curse that his sister installing knew something was wrong. What is it? He turned to face her and said, "It's Gaara sis. She has a personality seal on the back of her neck that is making her act like an homicidal maniac again, and I can tell from the crude work that it's the snake freaks." Chiyuya let out a small curse as she did not want them discovered by their potential enemies. They had seen many potential problems come and go, but had also seen two teams that made up the Rookie Nine, as they were known, recognizing one of them from Wave Country, a little W. While later they then saw the Sound team enter the academy, and right behind them was none other than the Snake's own master spy Kabuto, and his team had to forcibly restrain several members of the Team F. Rom going to kill him because of past encounters. Not yet, you four. I know how much you want to kill him, but just went okay. The four of them just nodded, but really wanted to rip him apart for what he had done to them alongside Orochimaru. They then saw two more teams enter, including one with a strange green spad wearing young man enter the building as with his team. At this moment in time their senseis decided to enter the building and wait for them, as it was getting close to the time for the EAM to begin. The three crew members of the Black Vein then noticed the other team they had seen in the Wave mission now entered the building and decided that it might be a good time to enter as well. For whom the bell tolls by Metallic starts playing in the background as they entered the building. Rock Lee and his teammates Tent and Neji were getting ready to enter the EAM room, only to stop dead in their tracks seeing the Mist teams walking by and coming to the realization of just they were. Ten could not believe who she was seeing again after all these years. "Guys, that's him." Neji looked at her and asked, "Who are you talking about?" "That guy who just walked by is Naruto Uzumaki, also known as the Pirate Lord, the Black Foe," she said to them, only to see them both look at him with a mixture of fear and excitement facing someone of his caliber. Guy's team watched them walk up to the A.M. room and watched as the foe in one quick motion brought his foot up and slammed it into the door, sending the door flying into the room. Sasuke had just asked Kabuto for information on both Rock Lee and Gaara of the desert when the door to the classroom suddenly flew inwards, nearly hitting several of the Chunin hopefuls. Everyone was exceedingly angry at who had just done that, only to go pale. Ite Scene, who was standing in the doorway slowly walking in, lick the song stops at this moment. As soon as Sasuke and Kabuto to get up the look over, only to see one of the most notorious people in the entire elemental nation standing before them. Sasuke quickly turned back to Kabuto and demanded to know everything about the Black Foe. "All right, let me see if I've got something here then. Oh, here it is." Kabuto turned around to look at the wall where the door had stopped, only to see that it had been embedded in the wall from the force of the kick alone, and became very concerned, as just about every one in the room was now looking at the ninja information card. Name: Naruto Uzumaki. Status: Clan Heir. Known alias: the Black Foe. Pirate Lord. Known jutsus: unknown at this time. Known swordsman skills: is known to have been trained by the 7 swordsmen of the Mist. A to S rank shinobi. SS rank sailor and mariner lord. Is known to have fought the 4th Mizukage alongside Mei Terumi, and is a Water Country War veteran. Everyone in the room was shocked to see this kind of information on someone who was competing in the EAM. Sasuke was once both shocked and happy to see them, since it meant that he quite possibly gain not only this man's fighting style but also his weapons as well. But before he could even demand anything of the Black Foe, they were interrupted by the appearance of the EAM proctor. Kakashi was currently standing in the teacher's lounge waiting for news on his students, only to see the face of 2 of the 7 swordsmen of the Mist standing in the room drinking coffee as if nothing was wrong and talking. "So do you think they're both going to succeed?" Kisame took a drink and then said, "Yep, I mean, we trained, for crying out loud, Zabuza. Good point. Kisame then smiled and said, I wonder how long it's going to take for them to figure out. He's in the EAM. Let's just wait and see. All of the Leaf Ninjas were curious about what they had been talking about and had totally forgotten about the time when a young Chunin came into the room to inform them that the net part of the EAM was about to begin, but also decided to make an announcement, just to let Eve Ryon know the black foes representing the hidden mist. Every single one of the other agencies in the room just looked at the two swordsmen as they just made a posting motion with their coffee mugs and big smiled upon their faces. Naruto and Tayuya had already given their teams codenames. His team was known simply as Black and her team was known as Red. Sasuke saw an opportunity to try to OBTA in the hidden blades from the pirates only to receive a strong kick to his reproductive organs courtesy of Tayuya, who then revealed her own hidden blades and have them at his throat as Naruto walked up to him and said it is more dangerous voice, which was the same one he used the day he killed Gato. You should think twice about walking up on us, men have been killed for less. Tayuya then removed her hidden blade from his throat, allowing him to get up. However, he decided to still be his arrogant self and demand things from people he should know better than doing that too. You will give me those hidden blades. Naruto let out a small laugh as he then said, is that so? Yes. And how would you know about these weapons if I might ask? Sasuke then pointed at Tenten and said, because her F.A. Thayer said he would make me a pair of them if I got him the designs, but I think I want your more. Naruto just laughed at him and said, sorry, but that's not happening on either front, and I'm going to have a little talk with her father later. Tenten walked up to him surprised and said, do you remember me, Naruto? His personality and voice changed as he looked her in the eyes and said, it's been a long time, old friend. But I am going to have to talk to your father about certain things. She gave him the nod and was happy to see that he still considered her a friend. He then noticed the pink-haired teammate of the Uchiha looked rather angry at him, however she could do nothing as their proctor arrived to start the net part of the EAM in the Forest of Death. I want to hear what you all TNK about this latest chapter and hope to have action in the net 1. I'm also doing more research on the net Assassin's Creed game and hope as many of those elements to the story as well. I will admit that it's going to be hard doing things for both teams Black and Red chapter, but that also might make it a bit fun. Please read and review. The third Hokage sat calmly in his office doing his most feared activity, the paperwork. He secretly wished that something would interrupt this hell on earth for him. Well, let it be said that his wish was granted despite the kind of paperwork it would cause later. A young Chunin ran into the office and quickly bowed to his superior and said, Lord Hokage, the black foe is currently here in the village, sir, and is currently competing in the Chunin EAMS for the Hidden Mist Village. The old Hokage could only mutter one word, realizing just how bad things were going to get for him, shit. Anko looked out upon the sea of potential Chunins and let out a gig. Glay as she walked up to them, intent upon seeing what they were truly capable of. However, before she could even begin, Anbu appeared right beside her and whispered something into her ear. Naruto and Tayuya's mist teams known as Black and Red looked upon this scene, realizing that it was about them, and let out a small bit of laughter as they waited for the net part of the EAM to begin. They then saw that Anko had walked back to the group with what looked like papers in our hands and then said, all right kiddies, now before we can begin this net fun part of the EAM in what I like to call my playground, but to others it is known simply as Training Ground 44 or the Forest of Death. She observed the assembled group talking amongst themselves as she continued to e-plane. Now for all of you to continue, you'll have to sign these waivers that states that if you, I don't know, let's say die. The Hidden Leaf is not responsible in any way, shape or form, so if you wish to continue, please sign right here. All of the Chunins who were assisting her began to hand out the waivers to all of the teams as their proctor then began to e-plane this net part of the EAM. Now here are the rules kiddies. EAM is a survival test that will take up to 5 days of your life in my little playground. Ino was truly surprised to learn this, but then heard her larger teammate say, 5 days. What are we supposed to do about food? Shikamaru could only shake his head at Choji's antics and simply muttered, troublesome. Anko could only laugh at the antics of one of her friend's son and then said, well, T is a survival exercise, remember, and it's a forest too, so when you think about it, food is everywhere, but at the same time you all might be food to the creatures living in here as well. One group of hopeful Chunin just had to ask, what kind of animals? She gave them a psychotic smile. All things like giant killer insects, poisonous plants that are also carnivorous, and of course my personal favorite, the big bad tigers that love to use our bones like a toothpick. Once again the talking began, quickly discussing this added bit of information. However, before they could continue, she decided to add a bit more to their thoughts. But that's not all, kiddies. Each of you will also be given one of these 2 scrolls here. Everyone looked at the scrolls and then her as she continued to explain. You'll need both a heaven and a earth scroll to proceed to the net part of the EAM, so you'll have to take one from one of the other teams. Oh, and by the way, don't open them. One of the hopefuls then asked, what happens if we open them? Quote, Enko just gave him a sweet smile and said, why spoil the surprise? Now to pass, as I said, you need both scrolls and all of your teammates still alive, and then get to the tower at the center of the training ground within the 5 days time limit that have been allotted to you, and you move on, otherwise you fail. Everyone looked at her with shock and a bit of concern as they realized that onlyaki it to the net part of the EAM. She then said, now my fellow shinobi here will escort each of you to an individual gate where you can begin this net part of the EAM. I'll just one more piece of advice for you all. Try not to die. Many of the high-ranking officers in the Fire Navy now stood upon the observation deck of the Fini Nest Naval Station and OBS. RVED, the small water nation fleet that had taken anchor just a little ways away in their harbor. One of the captains was studying each ship both in its design and armament. The lead admiral then turned to the captain and asked him about the water fleet. Have you been able to identify them? To be honest, sir, I have never seen any of these ships before. However, it's the 5 in the middle that worries me the most, sir, the captain said. The admiral was quite curious about the statements and then asks, what do you mean? The captain continued his assessment. From what I can tell, sir, the 3 big ones are clearly man of wars that make even ours look weak in comparison. Even their names are appropriate for them. Another captain with a spyglass then began to name the ships. The first ship's name is Great White. The second one is named White Tip, and the third is named Thresher. They're all named after sharks. It fits the tradition of the water navy, but what about the other 5? The admiral asked. One of the officers looked directly into a much more powerful telescope to get a good look at them. He then pointed the telescope at a black ship with black sails. As soon as he looked through his eyes widened both in shock and the realization of the political nightmare that had just come down upon his head, the Black Veen. So I take the rest are. Yes, sir, they are. Another officer said. What is your assessment? The admiral asked them. The captain took another look and began to speak. Those 5 for all heavy frigates, sir. The Veen is of a design I've never seen before in person. One of the captains was surprised by this statement. I thought you seen every vessel that floats. I've seen most of them, but there are exceptions. However, some of its characteristics remind me of whirlpool vessels before they're full. He then said to all of them. This caught everyone's attention as he then said, there is also another ship looks exactly like the Black Veen. I think it's another ship of the same class of vessel. Quote, the admiral's curiosity was piqued as he then asked, how dangerous do you think they all are? The young captain looked at the area containing the ships and then said with a stern voice as he gave his opinion, they will not be a danger to us unless we provoke them first. However, those 3 ships from the land of rice might be a different story, not just to us but to them as well. The admiral was curious by this statement. Why would that be? Because, sir, they were the ones helping with the bloodline war. The admiral turned back and knew that Somit Hing would have to be done in the future, as he himself did not trust the old water navy that had killed so many innocents in their time. Keep an eye on all of them. I want to know what they're up to at all times. Yes, sir. Naruto, Karen and Suigetsu had been escorted to their gate and were then handed their scroll for the EAM by an Anbu. Suigetsu then took a look at the scroll as soon as the Anbu had left them and then said to his comrades, looks like they gave us an earth scroll. The 2 Uzumakis nodded their heads and turned back to look at the gate as Karen then inquired, so what's the first thing we do once we are in there? Naruto looked the forest over and then said, we look for the scroll we need and I have an idea on how to get it. The 2 of them just nodded, knowing his ideas usually worked better than he had anticipated. Just then the gate flew open and the 3 of them rushed in as fast as they could, knowing that they had a destination in mind to execute their plan. Chiyuya and her teammates looked at their scroll, realizing this little piece of paper could determine their fate and that they had to find its companion to pass this part of the EAM. Hakueami. Ned the scroll and then said to her teammates, "It's an Earth scroll, this means we gotta find Heaven one right." "No you think, really?" Chiyuya said in a sarcastic tone. Inari could only roll her eyes at her friend's antics. Right at that moment the gate flew open and the three of them went right in, knowing that they had a lot of work ahead of them. The third Hokage could just feel the headache coming on badly as the meeting went on about the return of one Naruto Uzumaki. The council was trying to come up with a plan to keep him in the village at all costs. However, let it be said that the civilians were never ones for thinking ahead and for the consequences that these kinds of decisions would bring, as the Shinobi Council had eventually had enough and put their 2 cents in. "Are you out of your minds? He has diplomatic immunity from the Land of Water as one of their shinobi and is currently competing in the Chunin EAMS and cannot be touched by anyone here." One stupid council member then spoke his mind. "We cannot let the heir of the 4th Hokage escape us again. He needs to be here in the village where we can protect." One of the shinobi let out a sneer at hearing this and then said in a cold tone, "Oh yeah, this village did a real good job protecting his mother from harm, and he will not believe a single word any of you say, or as for that matter." "Why would you say that?" the civilian asked. Another shinobi then spoke out, "If you are trying to get him to marry your daughter so you can have access to his funds and so forth, I would forget about it right now if I were you." A rather feral-looking female shinobi then spoke for all to hear, "Either way we must talk with him. I suggest that we request a meeting with him as soon as the Forest of Death part of the EAM is done." They all began to agree with her, as they knew then things needed to be handled with care in this kind of situation. After just 20 minutes of being inside the Forest of Death, the three pirates had become quite curious and cautious as they walked through the thick foliage. Naruto turned to his cousin and asked, "Karen, how many teams are around us at this moment?" She stretched out her senses and felt the surrounding area and smiled. "Quite a few, cousin. They're not making any moves towards. I don't think they know we're here." He then gave a smile and began to sing out loud for all to hear, "Now we are ready to head for the horn." The two of them instantly knew what he was doing and began to sing the song Randy Dandy O. As well, way, I, rollin', go. Our boots and our clothes boys are all in the pond. Tim Rollick and Randy Dandy O. Ino had been curious about the Black Foe ever since seeing him at the EAM room and listened to Sakura's stories about what had happened on their Ms. Scion to Wave Country quite intently and was hoping to see him and his teammates in action. As they walked through the area they all began to hear three people singing and went towards the noise. "Heave a paw, heave away." Shikamaru and Choji were now very curious and a bit afraid as they followed Ino through the brush and eventually used a thick bush as cover and watch. "Way, I, rollin', go. He anchors on board and the cables all stored." Tim Rollick and Randy Dandy O. Choji was trying to figure out why they were singing so loudly and what kind of song this was. Shikamaru saw the looks of confusion upon their faces and said for them to hear, "It's called a sea shanty. It's a song used by sailors to help keep the crew's spirits up and to help them when they work. And they're bringing people in to take their scroll. Soon we'll be warping her out through the locks. Way, I, rollin', go." Many more people were in hiding listening to the song and waiting for their chance to attack, not knowing that they would be signing their death warrants as the net part of the song began, where the pretty young gals all come down in their flocks. Tim Rollick and Randy Dandy O. Heave a paw, oi, rollin', go. Anko and her fellow shinobi could only listen to the song as one of her subordinates ran up to her with a concerned look on his face. "We have a big problem. Soon we'll be rollin' her way down the bay. Heave a paw, oh, heave away, way, I, rollin', go. The anchor's on board and the cables all stored." Tim Rollick and Randy Dandy O. As soon as they were done singing, a group of rain shinobi appeared in a tree overlooking them. Naruto gave it a wicked-looking smile and walked forward and then said for all to hear, "Looky here boys, it's some lost birds that never learned to fly." The comment surprised them greatly that he would say such a thing, but what got their attention even more was that he pulled his sword out of its scabbard right at that moment and seemed to swing it in the air at them. At first they thought he was delusional or even insane until they felt the wind picking up around him and quickly moved, realizing he had shot a strong wind jutsu at them, completely destroying the tree that they had just been standing on. The look of shock upon their faces was not something they could hide at all, as they realized this was the same man who claimed to be the Black Foe. The other two members of his team also quickly removed their swords from their sides as well. However, before they could even make a move against Team Black, they heard noises of things crashing and breaking behind them and turned back just in time to see large sections of the trees coming down upon them. They were able to get out of the way just seconds before the large branches high to the ground where they had just been standing. The three rain ninjas were in absolute shock at the level of destruction that one swing of the black sword could do. They then looked at the other two amets and their swords and were also a bit surprised, as they had never seen weapons like this before. The other male member of the team, who sported sharp shark-like teeth just like the seven swords men of the mist, and had a strange shaped blade that looked like it had sections made of shark teeth that reflected the light off of them. The young red-headed girl sported a almost straight blade. She had strange sections built into the blade, and within a second it had become a whip-like blade, making their fears go up even further. The three rain ninjas were now very concerned as Naruto walked forward and spoke to the leader of the group. "Tell me, little rain ninja, do you fear death?" The young man could not even speak to them as he was very afraid. Naruto then gave a dark smile and spoke once more. "So you do fear death? Alright then, just hand over the scroll and the shall let you go. After all, there are plenty of days remaining in this for you to acquire the scrolls you need." "So what will it be?" One of the other rain ninjas then spoke out. "Don't give him the scroll." Before any of the others could say a word, the strange whip-like sword wrapped around the young man who spoke out just a second ago. Karen held the blade tightly and then spoke in a deadly tone. "Remember, boy, we are S-rank level shinobi and pirates, and as you know, S-rank usually means is the money really worth your life?" Naruto then held out his hand for the scroll. "What will the decision be, boy?" The lead ninja then handed over the scroll to Naruto and began to back off as Karen then released her rain shinobi, who also began to run deep into the forest following his comrades. Team Black then looked at the scroll and smiled, as it was exactly what they need. "Now that was a bit easier than I thought it would be." Suigetsu could only smile at their luck. "So what's the net move, Captain?" "We head to the tower as soon as possible. Keep an eye out for any more danger." With this said, the three of them began to walk deeper into the woods and eventually disappeared from sight. Ino, Shikamaru and Choji were at a loss for words at this moment as they watched the three pirate ninjas disappear into the woods. "You guys saw that, right?" Quote. They could only nod to her as Choji then spoke. "That was so unreal. How are they even competing in this eme?" Shikamaru had a theory and spoke out. "From what information we heard before in the classroom, they are all highly dangerous shinobi, but because of the civil war in the land of water at the time, they were unable to be promoted, so while they may act to ally be at a Jonin's level, they are actually still ranked as Genin. So instead of getting a field promotion, they are here competing in the eme," Ino said in a questioning tone. Shikamaru nodded his head as they all realized how dangerous this particular eme was going to be. Team Red of the Hidden Mist Village, led by Tayuya, continued to walk through the forest, hearing from time to time the sounds of battle occurring in the distance. Just then her communicator came to life. "Hey sis, how are you doing?" She then spoke into the communicator as her teammates listen in as well. "We are doing well, brother, but haven't found another team yet. Keep your senses open, as I suspect it won't be long until someone tries to come after you guys. We already have our scroll, so we're on our way to assist you," he said over the line. She just rolled her eyes and nodded her head as she responded. "All right, we will meet up with you soon. Keep your eyes open until we meet up." "Got it, sis. Be careful. We will be." As soon as she said this, they began to walk through the area, keeping their eyes and ears open as they went. As soon as they entered the clearing, they saw a group of earth ninjas standing waiting for them with a very evil look upon their faces. The lead ninja then walked forward with a blade in his hand and a smug look upon his face, now seeing that it was the somewhat less dangerous group of mist shinobi. The three females could only let out a small laugh as they approached the group of young men who were too inexperienced for their own good. The lead shinobi then spoke. "You know, if you girls don't want to die, just hand over your scroll to us." All three of them turned to each other and started laughing out loud for all to hear. Tayuya could barely contain herself as she then said, "Are you guys like comedians or something? Because if you think that is enough to make us give up this scroll, you got another thing coming. Like your death." The three of them became enraged enough that they fell right into the three girls' trap. Haku quickly materialized several of her ice needles and tossed them right into the neck of one of them with something attached to them that looked like a seal tag attached to the ends, which then began to sizzle and finally exploded. The other two were caught totally off guard by this, as Isaribi then produced two swords made out of pure water that then cut through the middle section of her opponent. The final member of the Earth team was so shocked by their skills that he didn't even register at first the blade passing right through his heart by Tayuya. He looked down at his wound and watched as she pulled the sword from his chest and then spoke in a surprised tone. "That's not funny, that's not funny one bit." They then watched as his body fell forward hard and then rolled over on his back, revealing his shocked face. The three of them began to immediately check the bodies for their scroll and came up on another Earth scroll. Haku then asked, "What do we do now?" Quote, "We take it with us, it might prove useful in the future," Chiyuya said to them as she then began to walk deeper into the forest. The three of them walked through the forest for some time until they met up with Team Black, who walked up to them. Naruto then became curious and asked them, "Were you able to acquire any scrolls?" Chiyuya held up both of her Earth scroll and then said, "We got one, but it's the same one we already had before, so out of curiosity, what do we do now?" Before Naruto could even say a word, they heard sounds of battle off in the distance. He quickly realized this could open up an opportunity for his sister's team. Well, that sound could be opportunity. Knocking. "Yeah, with a cannon," she said with sarcasm. IWED her brother and his team towards the sounds of battle. Sasuke could still not believe that this strange grass ninja that they had encountered was in fact the renegade Sannin Orochimaru. The snake Sannin had proven to be more of a threat than they had anticipated, as he had easily taken the team apart piece by piece and was toying with them the whole time. His other two teammates were attempting to aid him in his fight against the Sannin, but had proven to be only a minor nuisance to the man. He however quickly took on a smile, made several hand signs and shot out of his neck in some strange manner and quickly bit down upon the neck of the last loyal Uchiha, sending a wave of pain throughout his body like never before. As soon as the offending serpent-like man left his upper body, a strange seal appeared on the back of his neck. His teammate Sakura was already at his side attending to the wound. However, both of them as well as their third teammate looked up in shock, seeing the heaven scroll they had been given at the beginning of the aim in the renegade Sannin's hands, only to watch it be ripped out of his hand by a strange bladed whip. All of them looked over to see both Team Black and Red standing on a NEA/RBY tree overlooking each of them in a predatory way. Karen eventually caught the scroll without even trying to look it and gave a smile. "Found one, but what do we do about him?" The snake Sannin was seething with anger, knowing exactly who they all were. While he had seen them earlier at the entrance of the Forest of Death and in the EM room, he had secretly been hoping not to run into them at all, knowing that he had to keep his power at a certain level to remain hidden from the village's Anbu. Naruto and Tayuya turned to each other and shared a look that did not escape the snake Sannin's notice, as he then felt all the hairs on his body lift up as the two siblings turned back to look at him with wicked-looking smiles upon their faces and sad at the same time. "Kill him." Right at that moment, all of them pulled out several handguns and pointed them at the snake Sannin's head and gave it a simple smile as they pulled the triggers, sending the projectiles at their intended target. If it had not been for Orochimaru's years of appearance, he would have been finished off right then and there. The rogue Sannin ran as fast as he could, dodging projectiles every second, only to realize that Errol of the shinobi pirates had disappeared from view, only to barely dodge having his head cut from his body thanks to a swing from the black foe's blade known as the Maelstrom. The blade missed his neck only by a few centimeters and sliced through the trunk of a tree like a hot knife through butter, thanks to its wind affinity, which was only 1/8 part of the unique blade's power. The snake managed to jump to another branch, just managing to catch a glimpse of the foe leveling another pistol at his head. The snake quickly made a change in his destination, only to be shocked by what appeared to be a large monster of some kind trying to crush him with its huge fist. If that wasn't enough, he then saw the young girl with strange wraps around her body, who then quickly held up what could only be described as a cannon shotgun hybrid kind of weapon that she pulled the trigger on, sending the large amount of shot of lead at its intended target. But with three opponents, it was much harder for him to dodge this time. As the shot rammed into his body, he felt most of his back ripped apart by the impact. To the surprise of many, including Team 7, he seemed to almost produce a new body directly T of his mouth even down to the trials of drool and slime coming off him, leaving behind a empty husk much like a snake sheds their skin. Sakura as well as her teammates were now transfixed upon what was happening and even a little grossed out at what the snake Sannin had just done. She then watched as the red-headed girl wearing glasses seemed to shoot out her strange whip-like blade at him only for the Sannin to dodge her attack. She then literally flung herself to a higher branch thanks to her blade. And then within a second she made a movement of her blade sending the whip-like blade cutting another branch off, sending it flying down at the recovering Sannin, who was just able to dodge in the nick of time. Orochimaru knew if this battle was to continue he would be discovered by the Anbu and his plans would be ruined. He quickly managed to replace himself with a mud clone and made a run for it, hoping that everything would work out in the long run. The teams quickly dispatched the last CL1 and were absolutely surprised that he had gotten away so easily. They all then quickly regrouped and looked at the state of Team 7. Sasuke could barely maintain consciousness thanks to the tremendous amount of pain that he was experiencing at this time, only to see the black foe walk up to him and say, "I know that look, boy, he put that particular seal on your neck. What I'm about to do, boy, will help you despite how it might not seem at first." With that said, he quickly punished the young Uchiha out cold with one punch. The pink-haired girl became quite angry at this until she saw the muzzle of the gun in her face and heard him spoke. "I know what I'm doing, girl. If he had remained awake he might die in time. At least now he has a 50-50 chance of survival." She was truly surprised by Hi's comment but watched as he quickly took the earth scroll from his sister and threw it at them. Before she could even make any sound he simply added, "Be happy that we are even giving you a scroll, girl. That heaven scroll, girl, is our compensation for helping you out at all. Be thinking us, and one more piece of advice." They all looked at him intently as he then said, "Make sure that that one Ensei of yours gets that thing sealed up as soon as possible." With that said, they then disappeared into the woods, leaving Team 7 behind with a different scroll than they had started with, but a scroll nonetheless. I will be editing the chapters from time to time just to let you all know. Again, I would like to hear what all of you think about the chapter. I have been able to learn much more about UT-AC4 and its new features such as the ability to find songs for your crew to sing. The song I used was featured in a trailer and is also a download track on YouTube in the PlayStation area and is on of the songs to be featured in the game that your crew can say as they go about working on the ship. I also intend to use the diving bell feature of the game in the story in some way as well. I have also bought a new attentional story ideas but realized they will not fit this particular story but would be good for their own, and have also decided to work on a new version of the story as well, but nay, to be released at a later date after I hopefully finish this story, which should give me more time to polish that story up as well as to continue to work on this one more and more as I am making my primary stories for the moment, but also intend to do work on the latest chapter to the Fallen and would like to hear what you all think about in alternate versions of this story as well as any ideas on who the Net 2 Mariner Lords will be and who is responsible for the death of Naruto's mother. Please read and review. I will be working on this chapter as well as the new one for a bit and will be working on all of them from time to time. By the fourth day of the Chunin, Team 7 had finally made it to the central tower of the Forest of Death, after informing their former sensei, who had greeted them there upon their arrival. He was then informed about what had occurred to them out in the forest, and they were instantly brought before the third Hokage, who listened intently to what they had explained and what had happened to them. The old village leader was not happy to hear that his renegade and fallen student Orochimaru had decided to return and had attacked several of his young shinobi out in the field. He was however even more surprised by what they had told him about the two mist teams known as Red and Black. Fed to the accounts of both young Ino and Sakura as explained everything that they could remember about their encounters with both the Snake Sannin and Mist's team block. The two young girls' accounts were absolutely startling on just how powerful Naruto and his fellow shinobi pirates really were. The Jonin at this time all listened to the report given by the young girls and could hardly believe their ears, but had gone to see the battlefield for themselves and were in absolute shock at what was before them. All of the assembled Jonin now sitting in the room were at a loss for words for both the capabilities of the pirates and that of Orochimaru. You who won't know that all power had proven to be quite unnatural in all respects to everyone in the room. but it was his presence in the EAM that unnerved them greatly as Asuma then spoke out loud for all to hear. Your former student dad has made quite a powerful enemy if you ask me. The other Jonin in the room could only nod their heads in agreement as Anko then said, I would have really liked to have seen that battle. I mean my former sensei got his ass kicked by a group of badass pirates, I love it. Everyone in the room gave a small bit of laughter at her comments but were also quite surprised by young Sakura's account of what the Snake Sannin was now capable of in combat. Concerns now began to race in all of their minds if it was even technically possible to kill him now. However, the Y surmised that it was possible but very hard if he was forced to flee in the first place. Anko shook her head in a negative manner and then spoke for all to hear, no, that would not be a good idea. Why? The third asked of her. He stated that if we cancel the EAM he would destroy the village and kill everyone here in the village. I don't know what he's planning but the power he displayed even a reduced level was more than enough to keep me guessing and on my toes. Whatever he's up to Lord Third, it's not good, she said with all honesty in her voice as she observed everyone in the room Ying to figure out the puzzle that was the Snake Sannin and his actions and motivations. However, another Jonin then inquired about Naruto and the other mist teams. Well, that's all good, but what about the Black Foe? The third Hokage then simply said, leave him and the mist teams alone for the time being. I don't want to create an international incident by provoking him or anyone else. Ever. Why? One of the assembled Jonin nodded their heads and went back to their duties thinking about what could happen from this point on. Naruto and Tayuya were atop a pillar watching their fellow host NTLY wondering what would happen in a day or so when it comes time to fight in the preliminaries. Thanks to their eagle vision they were able to see the seal upon their sacrificed brethren and felt a great deal of anger because they recognized the sloppy work of Orochimaru. The two siblings had to restrain themselves from wanting to both go out and find the Snake Sannin and rip him a new one as well. L is doing seal on him as punishment but knew that they had to wait for the opportune moment to present itself when the mental stress would weaken the seal on Gaara, greatly making it quite easy to break even in the heart of combat. Right at this moment Karen appeared alongside her cousins and felt a bit of concern as well, knowing how hard it would be to save the female Send user. The three of them watched her enter her room without even noticing anyone at the time was observing her thanks to their skills as assassins. After she entered her room the three of them made their way down to the floor. Aaron walked about noticing the concerned looks upon many of the other competitors who were already going to compete in the EAM. Tayuya then spoke, one of us has to face her and no matter what, if we don't take out that seal she could continue to become unstable to everyone. Karen nodded her head and then said, it will have to be one of you two that is going to have to fight her. I'm good but not that good, and as time goes on she will just become more and more dangerous to everyone around her. Naruto now stopped in front of his room and turned to them and said, we'll worry about it tomorrow. That's when this part of the EAM is over and no matter what we are going to have to fight, be prepared. With this said he opened the door entering his room and looked back to see his sister and Yusen walking to their rooms giving him a nod of understanding as they went. Once inside however he was shocked to see none other than Tenten herself standing there looking at him with a bit of a concern upon her face. She walked forward as soon as the door was closed and gave him a strong hug and then a deep passionate kiss upon the lips. You've proven to be a very hard man to track down at times, Naruto. Why didn't you tell me you for the Black Foe? He gave her a sorrowful look. You were safer not knowing at the time. 10, which also brings up another question. And what would that be? Why? Does the Uchiha think that he can get a set of hidden blades from your family? She wasn't too surprised by this statement. Believe it or not, we were not the first people he's gone to looking for a set. Luckily my father did say that the only way he could even make a set of them was if he had the blueprints, and I doubt that there were any of those nearby. Naruto just gave her a smile and a bit of a laugh as he then said, more than you know. However, from what I remember about you, Tenten, which has also made me come to really like you as well as that simply you want a set of your. Or am I wrong? She could not help but let out a small laugh. Yes, I would like a pair of my own, Naruto, but I also have to ask you what the hell is going on. Haku and Isaribi currently said in the cafeteria eating some food and listening in on the conversations of their competitors, remembering the lessons of not only their syntheses but also their captains who were whole alleged members of the Assassin Brotherhood. At the moment the conversations were mostly about what was going to happen next and who they would have to fight. One of their own hopes was that everyone was still underestimating the team. Red of the Hidden Mist would be the easier team to take down, knowing that they could use this to their advantage. Luckily the majority still thought of them as the weaker team, but some were being overly cautious since they had made it to this part of the EAM. They then saw and heard the blonde and pink-haired girl talking about some things that had taken place. I'm telling you, those two Hidden Mist teams are something to be absolutely afraid of. They tore that Orochimaru guy apart like it was nothing. Oh come on forehead, I saw them in action as well. The Rain Ninjas never even stood a chance. And that's not all, they let them live, even got a heaven scroll out of it. Ino said to her longtime friend, despite how some things had gotten in the way, but it was good to be getting back together again. Wait a minute, they had an opportunity to kill those Rain Ninjas that we encountered. That was one annoying battle to get a scroll from them. Sakura said to her friend, remembering the amount of pain and frustration they went through. I definitely looks like those guys knew what they were doing if you were having serious problems with them. But wait a minute, did you say the name Orochimaru? Yeah, he came after our team and tore us apart like it was nothing at all. While that was until the pirates showed up and basically went all out on him. Why do you ask, pig? Ino was in absolute shock at what she had just heard her longtime friend say. Sakura, Orochimaru is on the same level as the Hokage. You guys went up against a cage-level opponent and lived to tell the tale. You mean he's that much of a danger? He's got his own section in the bingo book, for crying out loud, Sakura. You see how many Jonin and Anbu are here. It's all because of him, I'm sure of it. The two girls began to look around the room, noticing just how many higher-ranked shinobi were in the room with them. All of them still trying to come to grips with what happened out there. Sakura said as she looked around the room, observing all of the higher-ranked shinobi moving about the room. Ino then put her trinket down and looked her old friend in the eyes as she said, you do realize though that LL3 of you got to see those pirates in action. Do you know how many people here want to see what they are really capable of? Sakura was now curious about how much her old friend knew about these pirates. You sure seem to know a lot about them, Ino. Ino let out a laugh and spoke. All I know is what my old grandfather on my mother's side has told me, because he's a sailor. Kakashi, since he told us about this old man, or as some were calling him, an old salt they met back in Wave Country. He said that he told them stories about the Black Foe. Well, old salt describes my grandfather to AT. The stories he's heard and what he saw the foe himself do is something I at times found hard to believe. But after just seeing him and his teammates in action, force starting to wonder just how much of it is real. By this point many other Chunin home goals were listening and hoping to learn more about the unpredictable ones they might be facing. As Ino began to relate what she had heard, one of the stories he heard was that all of the mariner or pirate lords have been gifted with these amazing abilities that make them very hard to kill. One of those said abilities is something about turning into these walking skeletons that are neither dead nor alive. But it is said if anyone else possesses this ability, it would be a curse upon them. My grandfather was with a merchant convoy to the Crescent Moon Kingdom when they were attacked by several Water Nation warships that proceeded to attack them without provocation. However, they forgot all about the fog. One of the genin from the Hidden Sound village then asked, "What's so scary about fog?" Ino turned to look at him and said, "On the high seas it's a deadly weather phenomenon, makes it almost impossible to see what is right in front of you. Or what might be hiding in, which is exactly what happened to those water ships." Every single one of the shinobi was now listening intently to her story, and that's where they came from. Two of the most feared mariner lords and their ships, the Black Venin is kept in the Blacks, as well as her ship, the Rukin, ship of Lady Rouge herself, known as the Voodoo Queen of the Land of Lightning. Shish. He paused for just a moment to pour herself another drink. Before the water ships could even do any serious damage to my grandfather's ship, they came in like a swarm of locusts, firing cannons like he was nothing, but there are still too many shapes. That is what my grandfather saw him do it. He stretched out his hand, blood dripping from her, strange the noise, and saw something move through the weight. Within seconds one of the smaller ships of the enemy was pulled under the water, breaking in two at the center. The other two surviving Water Nation ships try to make a run for it. I thought their SWO. He concurs and screaming out the word Kraken. Everyone was surprised by this, and some had heard the same story. Just then the last ship was pulled down by the side. man screaming out for mercy. B. None was given to them for what they had already done. It was the locker for them all. Everyone in the room was now very concerned about these pirates. One of them then pointed to where two of the East ninjas had been sitting. Only see the seats now empty, surprising everyone in the room. The Feeney Nest officers watched the water and sound vessels intently as they wanted to avoid any kind of trouble. However, they weren't looking at the sea itself as a small group of Aqua Special Forces moved under the water towards their targets, which were the sound vessels. Leading the group was none other than Lady Rouge and a one-eyed mist shinobi named Ao, who moved beneath the waves as they continued upon their destination. That very destination was the bottom of the ships, and thanks to the implanted Byakugan of Ao's that was going to allow them to plant their bombs directly under the powder magazines of the sound vessels. Everyone was doing everything they could to not only conceal the chakra and sound from beneath the water so no one would know they were there, as well as planting bombs in such a way that if they were detonated it would look like an accident. After just a few minutes they made their way back to their own vessels, thankfully without being detected by their enemies. Once back aboard, the Great White May and the Water Daimyo were calmly waiting for them as they took off their breathing gear. I take everything went as planned. Lady Rouge could only nod her head. Ao, myself and the team were able to successfully plant the charges directly under their power magazines. If it was not for Ao's, I would never have been able to succeed. If they tried to attack, we will have an advantage to use against them in the future. The Water Daimyo and May nodded their heads as the went to bed to prepare for the next day. May turned to her nation's leader and said in a calm manner, "That should take care of a few things. I'll see you in the morning. Remember, the net part of the begins soon. Be prepared." By the afternoon of the net day, word had reached the proctors that all of the competitors who would make it to the tower were already there and that the net part of the would begin. All of the Chunin hopefuls arrived in the center practice area with several large statues and what looked like a giant scoreboard. The two mist teams were ready for this part of the as they listened to the proctors and the Hokage, who claimed that this part of the would be a one-on-one battle royale type of fight to determine who would move on in the From what they had learned, many of the same rules from the Forest of Death still applied here in this part of the After all of this was said and done, he then noticed that the first two competitors would be Team 7 Sasuke Uchiha, him and another Leaf Shinobi who he could not remember the name to save his life, entered the fighting arena below. The battle proved to be quite interesting because the young Uchiha could not access his chakra as well as he liked, which was proving to be quite difficult to control his attacks and keep the curse seal in check, but after a little bit of time Sasuke finally managed to rein in the seal and defeat his opponent, but was definitely showing signs of suffering the effects of using his chakra and trying to suppress the seal. As soon as he was declared the winner, his sensei took him into a back room to take care of the snake's problem. Naruto and Kisame at this time then noticed the sound sensei following the Cyclops into one of the tower's back rooms, which was highly suspicious and also was unnoticed by the Leaf forces present in the room. The pirate and the swordsman quickly nodded to each other and followed directly behind their suspicious target. The scene E2 came upon was intense to say the least, as the famous copycat ninja was preparing to shove his lightning-fast attack into the rogue Sanin's chest as they entered the room. But before easier of he older man in the room could make a move, they heard the sound of clapping and observed forms of Naruto and Kisame walking out of the shadows of archway. "I thought you already had your market on that young boy Snake. Or are you just trying to get some extra credit for good measure for whatever you're planning?" Orochimaru would be lying if he said that he was hoping not to run into any of them, not only the notorious pirate lord but also any other member of that organization, either past or present. A level of fear crept into them knowing that he had two of these individuals standing not then 5 feet from him, just itching to draw their weapons and have a go at him. Kakashi was now very concerned about what had happened and could only pray that things would work out for him and his incapacitated young student. But at the same time he also felt a desire to capture his sensei's young back to his home here in the Leaf. The Snake Sanin could only smile on the inside, knowing that everything he had planned with this young boy was going according to plan. However, he still had to contend with the two dangerous groups of ninjas on either side of him, knowing that either one of them would do everything in their power to make short work of him. However, he was surprised to see that the two newcomers moved aside. "Why are you opening a path for me?" "Because we're here to compete in the and While killing you would be very pleasurable, it would also interfere with our own ambitions, so we will make you a deal. You leave us alone, we leave you alone until this is all over, but if you attack us at any time, Snake, we will kill you," Naruto said to him with a sense of seriousness in his voice. Orochimaru looks back and noticed that Kakashi wanted to pursue him but was in no position to do so, and realized he could make his escape, but at the same time was taking the pirate ninja's threat very seriously, as he had already crossed the young man more than once and do not want to be on the receiving end of another kill fast. "I'll leave, and I know you won't come after me, pirate. As for you, Hatake, I just came to see if my little project was progressing as I expected, and as things are going, I'm more than pleased." Kakashi was surprised by what had just happened but wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth, as it were. He then turned to the two of them and asked, "Why do you two let him go?" Kisame turned to the one-eyed leaf ninja and said, "Do you really think any of us would have gotten out of this without some form of damage, considering that he has to compete in the EAM, besides you have to tend to your student?" He simply acknowledged what they said and watched as the two of them eyed the room, realizing that there was going to be much more going on than he was aware of. The two of them returned just in time to see the young Nara defeat his female opponent from the Hidden Sound Village. A good number of points have already taken place, luckily none of the missed competitors had completed yet. Naruto then looked up at the scoreboard as it displayed not only his name but also that of one Kiba Inuzuka, the young man, since he turned him and said, "Whatever you do, Kiba, do not underestimate this young man. I got this one in the bag, sensei, don't worry about me." He noticed, however, the not very reassuring look on her face as he jumped to the floor below. We then watched The Black Foe did a backflip off the railing and landed on the arena floor like it was nothing. The two of them and one nin dog now stood near inches from each other as the proctor then spoke, "Let the match begin." As soon as this was said, the proctor jumped back and watched as the young dog user jumped forward, going in, hoping not to give his opponent a chance to counterattack. Unfortunately, he was prepared for the foe and to simply grab wrist and literally throw him in wall and quickly take the small puppy in the head, knocking the little white dog out cold in the process. Kiba, despite being in own serious pain, managed to stand up only to be shocked at seeing his partner unconscious on the ground from one hit by his opponent. Unfortunately, his hot-headed nature prevented him from thinking things out clearly as he once again rushed his opponent. Naruto had grown tired of this match already and he just needed to move on and quickly began to beat some sense into his young opponent. Ho could not put up a decent defense to stop the total beating he was receiving. Up in the stands, however, his cousin and sister knew that in all honesty the boy and dog were getting off easily. They had seen Naruto really go all out, which had left people on the level of the Hokage pleading for their lives. In all honesty, the young boy is now laid on the ground, still conscious but unable to move, as Naruto then turned to the proctor. "Well, winner, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto then looked down at the young man and said to him, "Not bad, kid, but you need to learn control. If you don't, it will kill you." The foe then smiled at Hinata as she went to tend to her teammate, but also caught the look of recognition since he had helped her all those years ago before he had left the village. He observed her tending to her teammate and then noticed both of them looking up at the scoreboard and was also surprised by the two names and knew about the clan's bad history thanks to that bird seal. Karen knew little about this clan thanks to her cousin, but could also feel the tension in the air. How bad is this cousin? He kept his eyes on the arena below and then sent to her, "Very bad. When I was still she had been kidnapped by a foreign shinobi from the land of lightning and the hidden cloud village." "What happened?" "Her father intercepted him before he could make it out of the village and killed him in the process. It was revealed mania that the kidnapper was in fact an ambassador, and that this village and the Hyuge Council decided that to prevent a war they would sacrifice that young man's father instead of hers to prevent war from breaking out," Naruto said to her as the watched fight take place. Neji was doing all in his power to break his cousin down but was surprised to hear the one in black scream out, "Don't take his shit, Hinata. Show him there's more to life than hate." Hinata nodded her head to him and was secretly happy to see him once more, but wanted to keep that fact to herself as she prepared to fight her cousin and hopefully bring him back to the light. Everyone watched the fight between them and realized that this was a trunk show of the gentle fist style. As Naruto wanted her to win this fight, he could already tell them her cousin had already shot off her chakra points but hadn't emerged unscathed either, but unfortunately was enough for him to claim victory in a rather brutal way. You cannot fight me anymore. Fate has determined that you lose this match today. She looked up into his eyes and said in a defiant way, "No cousin, it is you who was defeated this day. And I pity you for it." She was unable to prepare herself for her cousin's sudden brutal attack aimed right at her heart. Virtually everyone tried to stop this but it was in the hand of the black foe himself that now held the offending hand in its place mere inches from her heart. Unfortunately, Naruto knew a bit about these kinds of attacks and knew that she needed immediate medical help, but luckily the damage would have been far worse if not for his quick action. He then turned to the young branch member and spoke in a deadly tone that left no error of his intentions towards this young man. "Tell me, young Neji Hyuge, is her desire to reunite your family really that bad? Do you want this revenge upon someone who was instant from it enough to risk your very soul? Tell me, do you fear death?" Boy! Everyone in the room was now very scared as Naruto squeezed the young man's hand tighter to emphasize his point and then threw him across the room like it was nothing to him and all. He then quickly picked up the young girl and brought her over to a medic that had just entered the arena. "If she dies, you die." The medics quickly began to work on her and nodded their heads. Naruto then looked up to the Hokage and spoke out for all to hear, "Make sure I get him, old man." Within a streak of black he was already back up in the competitor's area as if nothing had happened. The lights for the most part had proven to be impressive to say the least, but nowhere near the level of combat his team was used to. By the time most of the other fights had already been done, only a few were left, several hidden rock ninjas that decided to take on the rest of the mist teams. Chiyuya was able to engage a rather unique earth user who wasted no time in engaging her. By the time the woe of them were done, she was declared the winner, but the arena itself had to be repaired, took up to several minutes to complete. While this was happening, Naruto and his cousin would keep a close eye on Ngara so then they could decide when to act. Was clear timey that they would be unable to do anything for her at this moment. The net match was between another Earth Ninja and Suigetsu. However, the Earth Ninja decided to forfeit before facing someone like Suigetsu into combat, knowing his bloody reputation both on the battlefield and the open sea. The net match was between Haku and Isaribi, who were not very happy about having to fight each other. Despite this, the two of them quickly proved to be more than a match for most people. Unfortunately, the match ended in a double knockout with the Ina once again being severely damaged thanks to their flight. Karen on the other hand became rather unhappy that none other competitors wanted to even consider taking her on. Karen was rather a ngry that she did not get a chance to fight in this part of the EAM, but was happy that she had at least moved on. But at the same time she was hoping that she would be at least able to fight in the finals. After this was done, they all lined up in the arena floor awaiting to hear the final instructions of the EAM. The proctor then spoke, "The final part of the EAM will take place 1 month from Todd. I say you have plenty of time to prepare for the final, as they will be many dignitaries and important people here watching your performance." Each and every one of them took a number and held it up for all to see. As soon as Naruto saw that his and Neji's number were partners, he gave a dark smile at the hearing man, basically saying, "Have your affairs in order. I want to hear what you all think about this chapter. Please read and review." Just to answer a question that someone brought up about the story, yes, Naruto is a pirate technically, or what is known as a privateer, which is a legal pirate. The T means unfortunately that yes, he will have to obey some laws, and also remembered that he is technically the Whirlpool Daimyo. But will he find a loophole is a question some must ask. As for the Neji issue, you'll just have to read the story. Suigetsu was not a happy camper at this very moment in time, as he was being forced to carry the unconscious form of Isaribi as Zabuza carried Haku in his arms and out of the tunnel connecting the tower to the force of Death's interior. The former apprentice of the Seven Swordsmen would have said something, but saw the look on the three Uzumaki's faces and did not integrity them one bit, as he remembered just how dangerous they could be. All three of them were silent but in deep contemplation about what they want to do in the finals. But before they even step more than a couple of feet out of the tunnel, they were interrupted by what looked like several Anbu Black Ops waiting for them. Their reflees from being battle-hardened went into affect, almost instantly reaching to their sides and moving into a protective circle of their comrades. The Anbu, sensing what was happening, all backed up to give them room and then spoke, "We are not here for a fight, only to deliver a message. Instead of rallying, all of them began tightening their grips as Naruto then spoke in a dark tone that left no room for misunderstandings. And what would that message be? The Hokage and the councils of Konoha request your presence for an emergency meeting. The lead Anbu said, hoping that they would cooperate. Well, tell the council and the Hokage that we are disinclined to acquiesce to your request. Even with the masks on, one could still make out the confused looks upon their faces. It means, no, gentlemen, now if you'll accuse us. The Anbu were shocked by his statement as they then tried to walk forward. The lead Anbu, however, had become both quite angry and agitated and then stood in their way. I'm afraid this is non-negotiable. You will be coming with us whether you like it or not. But before the situation could get any more out of hand, they were shocked to see several mist shinobi now standing at the ready, including none other than Mei Herschel. Standing there waiting for them to make a dumb move, and spoke. I'm afraid you can't do anything to them, sir. They do have diplomatic immunity, Mr. Anbu. However, Naruto, I believe it might be beneficial to pay them a little visit. The Anbu could see the gears working in the black foe's head and then turned to them and said, very well, we will come. However, if you think that we will not fight back, you'll be dead wrong. May walk with me. Now, everyone could see the redhead woman flinch, knowing that he was not in a good mood as the other two younger redheads walked up alongside him. I don't know what the hell you are planning, Cage. But if there is some joke, I will send you to the locker myself. Despite what many people might think about me and how she liked to intimidate people, the 5 pirate lords were, however, the only ones that could not only intimidate her but scare her at the same time and get away with it. Right now, having one of them very angry at her and in front of her, who also just so happened to have a 9-story tall foe with an attitude problem sealed in his gut, was not someone you wanted to be on the wrong side of. Even the Hidden Leaf civilians, who at one point would have tormented him, were now giving him a wide berth as they could. They could sense the hatred radiating off of one who was an absolute fool, managed to push one of the Anbu out of the way, trying to to Naruto, only to receive a backhanded slap that sent him flying into a nearby wall hard enough to crack it, making everyone even more afraid of him. One of the Anbu, who was excoriating the 4 mist ninjas or pirates depending upon how you chose to look at it, was in absolutely shocked as one of his colleagues had to go arrest a man for attacking someone with diplomatic immunity. Did you just see that? Yeah, I did. He's a far stronger than we thought. Needless to say, as they entered the Fire Shadow Tower, everyone was talking about his return. As they entered the council meeting room, several of the Anbu tried to push Mei and the girls out, only for Naruto to quickly pull his handguns out, pointing them at their faces. If you all think I'm just going to step 1 foot into this lion's den alone, you got another thing coming. Since I don't trust any of you all, at all. The third Hokage could cut the tension in the room with a broadsword at this moment and decided to try to disarm the matter as best he could. Enough, all of you. Now, Naruto, I would appreciate it if you did not threaten or kill any of my soldiers, but to be honest, I can understand your reasoning, and I would also like Ono, who was trying to stop the Mizukage from assisting him in this matter, considering that he is at this moment representing her village in the Eam. Naruto re-engaged the safeties on his guns and put them away, but still kept his hands on them at all times, letting everyone know just how serious he was about this and what was going on. Now, Lord Hokage, what is it that you want of me? One of the big fat civilians seemed to be quite insulted by his demeanor. You will show the proper respect to us, boy. Much to this man's surprise, Naruto and the 2 younger redheads began to laugh at him and then quickly pulled out their guns, pointing at his face to get their point across, as the older redhead then spoke. You do not deserve our respect, you fat fool, and if you even look at me and my cousin Lee that again, I will personally strap your feet to a cannon and drop you in the ocean. Am I clear? The fat man could only nod his head as they lowered their weapons once more, but did not put them away this time. One of the shinobi council members then spoke. Please forgive some of the civilian council members, Lord Uzumaki, as they know not who they antagonize. This council, including them, unfortunately have requested to talk you to try to convince you to return to your homeland here in the Land of Fire. Naruto could not believe what he was hearing. And what makes me think that anything will be any different this time around? Has anyone even bothered to look into my mother's murder? When no one responded to his question, he immediately knew the answer and spoke. I thought not. Only certain members of the Uchiha clan will help us out from time to time, and with them all dead now, I can only imagine the state of affairs in this village. The older redhead then spoke. I agree with my brother on this matter. One of the civilian council members then paled in color, realizing just who this young woman really was, as another council member then spoke. "What do you mean by brother, Ms.?" She turned to him and said, "My name is Tayuya Uzumaki. I am the daughter of the 4th Hokage, and this is my brother, as you all know, since you made his life a living hell as well as my mother's." Everyone in the room was now very concerned by this point, as this young woman was in fact the long-lost daughter of their great leader. Any action to try to convince them to return would now be very difficult, to say the least, if not impossible. Even the 3rd Hokage realized that their chances of trying to convince these young people to come back to the Hidden Leaf was now all but gone, like ashes falling from a fire. To convince these young people to return would be a miracle in and of itself. Naruto looked at all of their faces and then spoke for all to hear as he asked his question, "Is there anything else you wish of us?" Everyone in the room that watched as they eyed the room with a sense of defiance in their walk. The Anbu who had been guarding the door parted like the Red Sea for Moses, not wishing to antagonize these young pirates who could take down anything in their path and live to tell the tale. One of the council members and spoke to the Hokage, "What do we do now, my lord?" He fell. His age catching up with him even more. "I honestly don't know anymore. I just hope we can find this before it's too late." The 3 pirates and Water Shadow walked down the street of the Hidden Leaf village with a clear destination upon about them. May felt as if she had made all 3 of them rather unhappy and had forced them to reveal just how big their clan still was. The 4 of them, however, stopped dead in their tracks and overheard several high-ranking officers connected to the civilian council members discussing something about them. "So there's 3 of them still alive, is that what you're telling me?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you, but there's only one male Uzumaki left, and he just happens to be the son of the 4th Hokage as well." "Well, if that's the case, then what is the council going to do?" the other man asked as he took a drink. "Glad you asked, old friend. As it turns out, they're going to push the Clan Restoration Act, or CRA, on him." Everyone at the table practically spit out some of their drinks or nearly choked as they looked him in the eyes. "Are you sure it can even be done? Do you even know just how powerful the Uzumaki clan is? They are royalty, my friend," he said with a bit of excitement upon his face. "Royalty? Are you serious?" the other man asked. The other man gave a wicked-looking smile and said, "Yes, my friend, royalty. While that young and may not look like it, he is the owner of an entire country. That young man is one lucky son of a bitch. He is going to live every man's wildest dream." "I know what you mean, man, but at same time, has to be very cautious of who is going to end up in this little family of his." The other man nodded his head and said, "I see what you mean. Last thing I would want is a Uchiha fangirl on my butt." All 3 of the redheads standing near Naruto could just sense the anger and hostility coming off him, and even audible growling coming from him. He then turned and began to walk away like a man possessed. Before either of his relatives could even say a word, May beat them to the punch. "Not a word, okay?" The 3rd Hokage had just been informed about the revelation of the CRA that had been passed for one Naruto Uzumaki. The headache he felt coming on was like nothing he had endured before, as he realized all of the problems this was going to create later on, and let out a simple comment that said everything. "I'm too old for this shit." Everyone in the room at this time could only agree with him, as the civilian council member who pushed for this sat in a chair looking at everyone with a bit of concern upon his face. "I did not know this was going to create a problem, sir. If anything, I thought this might help them." Anko just looked at the civilian like he had lost his damn mind. "How is this supposed to be helping them? If anything, you just made matters 100 times worse." The civilian in question then spoke for all to hear. "His clan is extremely powerful, but also on the edge of extinction. It is estimated that there are no more than 10 members left in the entire world at this time, and only a few of them are even male." "But why would you push for the CRA anyways?" Asuma asked the man. "Because it offers them some protection against men and women who wish to take things from them, say like if that clan dies out." Both of them. The 3rd Hokage had become quite curious of this comment. "What do you mean, both of them?" "I mean the fact that Tayuya is the heir to the Namikaze clan, since she is the firstborn, but Naruto is the first male that was born, so he was made the Uzumaki clan heir, which gives him complete control over all the finances and special pieces of property that are controlled by that clan. In fact, when he disappeared after his mother's murder, the Neo-Aias India Trading Company attempted to seize all of their property, but due to certain laws they were unable to succeed. This act will protect them even further. You do realize this is going to be seen as attempt to seize some part of their fortune? Asked one of the ninjas in the room. Not in my case, I only have 2 sons and they have just married. The civilian said with a smile on his face. The Third Hokage then pinched the bridge of his nose and said, "Inform every one of our forces to give him and his family a wide berth for the time being." Everyone in the room nodded and went about their duties, each wondering what the future now held for their village. The trip back to the water fleet had been rather quiet as the small group tried to give Naruto some time to calm down after what he had just learned. As soon as he boarded the Black Vein, everyone on board instantly knew that something had happened to set his ill temper off like this. Most of the crew did their best to ignore him, knowing that he still needs to calm down, and would tell them what the current issue was in due time. Just then the sound of a small boat pulling up alongside the Vein was heard by everyone as a young female voice shouted out, "Naruto, I know you're up there, can I talk to you?" He let out a small growl and walked over to the edge and motioned for the young girl with what looked like bonds on the side of her head to come aboard. Permission granted Tenten. As soon as the young girl was on the ship, who appeared to be no more than a year and a half younger than their captain, was motioned to follow him into his personal cabin. Karen was happy to see her cousin still have at least one friend in this accursed village that had caused their family so much pain in the past. As soon as the cabin door closed, Tenten turned to her old friend and love interest and asked, "I take it by the growling you've heard." He pulled off his battle jacket and an equipment as well as the maelstrom sword and looked her in the eye. "Believe me, I had no intention of this ever happening. I'd like to know who the hell did this, so if you give him a piece of my mind." She shook her head and put her hand on his, guiding him to the couch in the room as they both sat and then spoke. "My dad knows the man who pushed for the CRA on you. Apparently this man did it knowing that there are certain international protections that come with it, including certain things that protect your father and mother's companies from the East India Company." At hearing about the Neo-East India Trading Company being mentioned, he let out another growl. "They always try to take what is not theirs. I can respect the man for that, but I still do not want this on me. I hate to say it, but there's nothing you can do about it, Naruto. I do though." "And that would be?" he asked her. "It does give me a small chance that I could be with you one day, but I want to get to know you better and really follow up with you, but I don't want to give up one of my friends either," she said with a bit of emotion in her voice that was something that she rarely ever showed to anyone. While he was still rather angry at what had occurred, he had to admit that the two of them had indeed begun to feel things for each other, but also knew that his battles were formed from over. He then walked over to her and took her in his arms as the two of them stood there silently, letting the world pass them by for the moment. Thanks to Tenten, who had brought the requirements of the CRA with so they could at least see what was going on, as it not only affected Naruto but also Yuya and Karen. The two red-headed girls don't their own anger increasing as they read that one of the requirements forced them both to produce at least one child by the time they were 22 years of age. However, this was nothing compared to the look upon Naruto's face as he read that she was expected to have at least 3 or 5 wives and at least a child among each of them, and unless of course it was 3 wives, who then had to have 2 children instead of 1. The only good thing was he had until the age of 24 to determine how many wives and who would be in the special harem, as it was known. "This is insane, cousin," Karen said out loud. If she read that if they could not find a suitable male, the council could order them to be artificially inseminated to ensure conception on their part as well. Yuya could hardly believe this had happened and how bad it was going to get as she looked up at Tenten and asked, "Don't the 3 of us have any say in this at all?" The assembled ship's crew in the main dining hall of the Vein all began to agree with Yuya, as well as Tenten then explained what she had learned. "I'm afraid it's a little more complicated than that. From what I was told, because of your clan's unique status and remaining political power, as well as who you are related to here in Fire Country, then you 3 are considered too important for your clan to become ETINCT. I sense a but coming on," Naruto asked of her. "It's a big one. If you can produce enough children with only marrying one person or a set of special partners, you can get out of the CRA. But you'll be able to keep all of its political protection." One of the older crew members, who was known to everyone as Old Salt and even had a parrot on his shoulder, then spoke in his gruff old voice that held a great deal of wisdom, since he was also from the land of whirlpools as well. to be honest with you three, your clan does need to come back in the world, and I just don't mean because the three of you are assassins or anything, but because your clan helped a great many people in this world out of the darkness. I think it's time you do so again, and we will be here to help you do it." Everyone cheered at this as Naruto then asked, "Well, that's all good, but what am I going to do about finding these young women who will accept this at all?" To everyone's surprise, Tenten then put her hand on his shoulder and then spoke calmly, "You got one right here who wants to marry you, and that's a place to start. We can move on from there." The crew all smiled and nodded at his first choice as they knew her well. This did not go unnoticed by their captain. "You guys aren't going to start playing matchmaker, are you?" "Maybe, but we will all definitely tell you if we don't trust any of your choices," Old Salt said. Karen then had to ask, "So what you're saying is, if he can produce enough children we can get out of this as well?" Tenten nodded her head and then said, "Yeah, that's the deal. Right now there are only 3 known members of your clan. That number has to go up to around 12 so you all can get out of this." Naruto just smiled at his crew and then said, "Works for me, so what do we do now?" Neji Hyuga had been avoided by everyone who knew him at home like the plague, and it was all because of what he had done to young Hinata, but every time that he thought that he would when he was assaulted by images of the black foe not only laughing at him but also standing over him laughing at his misfortune. What the young Hyuga prodigy did not know was that at this time was he as being watched by the snake Sannin Orochimaru, who just smiled at his chance to get even with the black foe, as the snake Sannin walked out of the nearby forest of the training field was not expecting the young prodigy to turn on him in a combat-ready formation. Orochimaru held up his hands up to show that he was not here for battle but to talk. "I have been watching you and I must admit I am rather impressed with what I have seen so far, Neji Hyuga." Neji did not lessen his stance at all but simply inquired, "What interests you so much about me?" "That's simple. I saw your desire for revenge. I know all about your clan's foolish history because of using that caged bird seal upon your forehead and its falling that has torn your family apart," the snake said to him, getting his attention. Neji would be lying if he said that he was not interested in what the traitor was saying to him. "And what would you offer me in return, and what do you want from me in return?" The snake Sannin gave him a sadistic smile. "That's very simple really, my young Hyuga. I wish for you to become more powerful, of course. As for what I get out of this is the annihilation of the black foe. Now tell me, are you interested?" Neji now sported a sadistic smile of his own. "When do I start?" "Right now, but first allow me to give you a little gift to help you on your way." As soon as Orochimaru said this, his neck then seemed to shoot out at Neji's neck with lightning speed. The third Hokage looked between father and daughter in his office as they both heard her say, "Are you sure of this, Tenten? I mean, this is a very big decision after all." "I'm sure, sir. I've been in love with him for a while now." The third had to admit at least that it did give him and the village a way to at least remain in contact with Naruto for now on. But still, the idea of losing one of his most viable young shinobi who had indeed specialized in all kinds of weapons was not something he was looking forward to. But on the other hand, he was happy for the both of them, and then returned to the water daimyo and asked of her, "How will things be set up for this wedding, my lady, as I'm sure you will have some concerns of your own?" The water daimyo nodded her head and turned to Tenten's father. "Sir, besides the two of them making this decision, I would also like your blessing in this matter, as it is only fitting that you have some say in this matter. And also because of his political satirist, we have decided to hold the ceremony on the small island of Kide, which is not that far from the Fini Nest naval base, is also not that far from our new embassy, which is currently under construction at this time." Her father nodded and then spoke, "I have no problem with the young man at all, and in fact approve of it this greatly. I am however only concerned that I will not be able to pay for this extravagant wedding." The lady daimyo could only smile and let out a small laugh. "Not to worry, sir, the land of water government, and by that I mean myself, will be footing the bill for this one." The third Hokage also breathed a sigh of relief at hearing this, since he first and how pensive weddings could be, especially one like this that had massive repercussions on a global scale. The water daimyo could see what he was going to ask her net and beat him to the punch. "Do not worry, Lord Third, as we are handling the invitations as we speak." He was content at hearing this, but still needed to know when the event would be occurring. "When will the wedding be taking place?" "1 week before the finals, Lord Third, and don't worry. RRY, we have definitely invited you and your family and I'll send an envoy to pick you up when it's time for the ceremony. He nodded his head at what she said and realized Thane of the biggest events to take place in the land of fire for some time to come. 1 week later, Tenten and her father had agreed to stay on board the Black Vein as Naruto trained her in using the equipment of the Brotherhood. Such as using the hidden blade and its companion the hook blade, but at the same time she also had to learn to be able to sail a ship and even command it in battle if need be. Much to Tenten's dism, her father was already a well-accomplished sailor and was in fact training her on things and testing the crew as well, when not practicing the ways of the Brotherhood or learning the ins and outs of sailing. The girls were busy planning the wedding, knowing that they only had 2 weeks until the ceremony and then only 1 week until the date of the finals. May had to admit that Tenten was definite. Her idea of a true kunoichi, unlike those pathetic young girls who dared to call themselves ninja in the first place and won't really anything other than fangirls. May could still tell, however, that Tenten was in fact a girl at heart, despised her tough and dangerous exterior. Tenten was currently modeling a beautiful wedding dress for her big day and looked at all of the assembled ladies to gauge their opinion. Everyone nodded their heads at her, signaling that this was the dresses for her, even getting a thumbs up from her father, who looked like he'd rather be somewhere else at that moment in time. A gentleman and a woman wearing a professional-looking set of suits and then asked her, "Are you saying yes to the dress?" Tenten was now smiling like a mad woman as she then said, "Yes, this is my dress." All of the women were cheering and screaming as one of the employees was making the finishing touches to the dress. Tenten could only imagine what was going to happen once the wedding day came. It's like a dream come true. I just can't wait for my big day, even though it's a 2-week wait. Her father, however, just rolled his eyes and then said, "Well, you'd better wait, little girl, you are married to him, little girl, you will not be doing anything in the extracurricular if you get my drift." "Fine, Dad, but you do realize that you probably will be a grandfather by this time next year," she said as his face went pale in color. "Please do not remind me, okay?" May laughed at their intakes and decided to ask a question to the bride. "Okay, I have to ask this, what made you want to become a kunoichi in the first place?" "Well, it was hearing the stories about Naruto's mother and the tales of Lady Tsunade of the Sannin that first inspired me to become a ninja, and then at same time I've seen women that give a bad name to kunoichi, like those fangirls for starters." Every one of the professional female ninjas in the room could only nod their heads in agreement as they learn about finding some more dresses for the ceremony. Naruto walked alongside both the third Hokage and Jiraiya as the 3 men talked about not only the ceremony but what was really going on. The third then said in a somber tone, "So that is what he is planning. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, old man, but you do deserve to know what he has in store for you." Jiraiya was surprised by what he had just learned and realized that the finals would be extremely dangerous. "Well, this shit sure complicates things. No matter what, we only have 3 weeks before the final, and what is he planning?" Naruto stopped dead in his tracks and turned to them. "We at least know how he is going to launch this attack, but what do we do in the event that he succeeds in his primary goal of eliminating you, old man?" The third then turned to them and looked them both in the eyes and then said, "I already have a plan, and whether I live or die is to be executed after the and I want you two to handle it personally." Jiraiya was concerned about his sensei was saying, "And that would be, you are to retrieve my successor, the 5th Hokage, Tsunade." Another week had passed without insight. NT is the Toad Hermit or Sage, depending upon who you asked, worked like a madman with this many contacts trying to find his other teammate Tsunade, but was so far shit out of luck. The stress was beginning to take its toll on him as well, but he continued to push on, knowing that this was for the best not only of the village but for everyone involved. The third entered the room that his perverted stud Ent was using at this moment to compile all the available data on Tsunade's whereabouts, and felt a tiny bit of pity for his more interesting student. "You look like you have been up for quite some time, Jiraiya." Jiraiya looked up at his old sensei with bloodshot eyes and simply muttered, "I never thought she would be this hard to track down, sensei. I've only got bits and pieces right now, but I have a feeling that after the I might just be able to get a couple more leads on her. We can only hope." Speaking of hope for us, where is Naruto? He went to the hospital to see that young girl that he promised to avenge. "I hate to admit it, sensei, but that girl's cousin has become quite a problem as of late," the old pervert said. The third walked over to a chair and sat down and letting the ears catch up with him as he let out a sigh. You mean young Neji, his well of fire is being tested like never before, Jiraiya. I fear for him now greatly, as he has let his own darkness and despair see loud his judgment so much that he cannot see his clan's only hope for redemption and stability that is resting in that young girl. That kind of darkness and despair will undoubtedly attract Orochimaru to him. I know what you mean, old man. He's got no fear or humility for that matter in any part of his body, or that old Hyuga stick is so far up his ass that we will never get out. Your old teammate would choose him for one reason: to fight Naruto. Jiraiya could only chuckle at hearing this. Maybe I was wrong about that stick up his ass being unmovable, if my old teammate thinks that giving that kid one hell of an overhaul is going to be enough to beat the black foe is almost laughable. If anything, that kid is going to get his ass handed to him. I pray you are right. The hospital of Konoha was proving to be more of a headache to Naruto than he had first anticipated. He and his sister, as well as his cousin, had just finished seeing Hinata, as Tenten had wanted to see the young girl. Thankfully the doctors said that she would make a full recovery with no problems thanks to the quick treatment she had received at the Central Tower. Naruto was indeed happy to see that she was well and recuperating with no problems. However, he could not shake a feeling of dread. He looked over to his sister to see the same look upon her face, as well in motion for her to follow him out of the room to investigate. However, the two siblings were not alone, as their cousin and Tenten had accompanied them into the hallway, and on what some would call pure instinct they activated their eagle vision and could see what looks like an enemy trail heading towards the room of one Rock Lee. The group of four entered the room of Rock Lee only to see the form of Gaara about to strangle the young nin in his bed. Before Gaara could even register what was happening to her, or that there were other people in the room, she was grabbed by her shirt and thrown out a nearby window by Naruto, who had gone in what some would call total black foe mode. Gaara was absolutely surprised that someone had gone the drop on her so easily and had managed to properly land, despite what many people might think was not enough time. Luckily for her, they were only on the third floor of the hospital, which made it quite easy for someone of her caliber to prepare for battle, and she did not have to wait long. Her sand came to Life within a second, blocking a slice from the maelstrom bladed courtesy of Naruto, knowing that he had to push her to her limits to free her from this seal that had been forcibly put on her by the snake Sanin. The two of them locked eyes and began to fight like there was no tomorrow. Gaara became more and more unstable as the fight progressed according to plan. Luckily, this was an unpopulated area of Hospital's courtyard, which also just happened to have a small river running through it connected to a large waterfall on the grounds. With one incredible show of both speed and strength, Naruto managed to bypass her defenses and deliver one massive kick to her midsection, sending her flying right into the waterfall at breakneck speed. Gaara could only emerge from the water in total shock, realizing that her primary weapon and defense was now for all intensive purposes useless. Before her compromised mental state could worsen any more, Naruto appeared directly behind her thanks to his own unique speed technique that allowed him to move faster than most people and drive his hand home, beginning to undo the corrupted seal from its victim. Gaara let out a blood-curdling scream, as it was unbearably painful to endure for anyone else. As soon as he was done removing this pathetic excuse for a seal, he quickly grabbed the redhead young woman before she could fall into the water and brought her to the shore where the others were waiting. Once on land again, both Nato and Tayuya noticed a strange feeling coming from their swords and realized that another one of the 7 Mariner Lord blades must be nearby. Right at that moment, Gaara regained consciousness and immediately locked eyes with Naruto, first smiling and then pulling him into a passionate kiss, getting the surprise of everyone including him. After stopping the kiss and letting him go, she then said, "You have no idea how good that felt, my fiancé." She was however surprised to see the look of shock upon all of their faces. "What are you talking about, Gaara?" Gaara could only rolled her eyes and then said, "Let me guess, my dad didn't tell you about the marriage contract that our parents set up before we were even born, right?" The look upon Naruto's face was one of shock. "I'm trying to get out of the CRA, not further in." I have to agree with everyone that the CRA was not a very good idea for this story, but it still gives me some story prospects, so he will be trying to get out of it, but at the same time keep the protection that it offers when he rebuilds his ancestral homeland. I want to hear what you all think about this latest edition of the story. I have been learning a lot more about the new game and hope to continue to add more things into this story. I decided to end the chapter with this bit about Gaara and Naruto being betrothed, as it will also add a bit more to the story and the new problems it will bring for them. I'm also working on the net 2 Pirate Lords will be, and I want to hear your opinions about what could happen. Please read and review. Tenten could not believe what she was hearing as Gaara continued to explain what was going to happen. Well, my father obviously did not tell you anything about the contrast, did he? Naruto could only shake his head as she then continued. That figures. From what I could figure out, it was set up as some kind of peace treaty between the Leaf and Sand villages. Why does this shit always seem to happen to me? I mean, don't get me wrong, Gaara, I do like you and all, but it's more of a friend. And don't get me wrong either, I could learn to like you, maybe even love you, but I don't want to screw up our friendship. Gaara gave a smile to them and then spoke in a calm voice. Well, that works for me, as you three did save me from myself, but there is a way out and I would love to try it out, if you get my meaning. All three of the Uzumakis suddenly got what she was saying and did their best impression of a fish trying to breath out of water. I really hate my life right now. We'll work something out later, hot foe, but in the meantime let's set things up so we can kill that snake bastard once and for all. Fortunately, the snake Sanin was unaware that his seal had been destroyed by the black foe and that Gaara was once again back to being herself, but they had perfected the art of deception long ago. The young sand user had informed her sibling, GS and Sensei, that her father, the Wind Shadow, was not acting normal and that something might be very long, as she informed him about the memory seal and that the snake Sanin Orochimaru was the last pay RSON to be with her, as the seal had been applied against her will. The sand ninjas were now waiting for the right opportunity to strike at the hidden sound forces. The water forces have agreed to saint them as best they could both during and after the battle. Naruto was currently in his personal cabin checking his charts and maps, looking for any advantages that he and his crew could use against the sound forces on the day of the invasion. So far he had only determined that the bay that their ships were currently in was both deep enough and wide enough for the water navy man of wars to success fully maneuver without any problems, and also allowing them to deploy their sails to gain minimum speed using one of their unique abilities despite their impressive size. The 5 Mariner or Pirate Lore D ships would also have no problem whatsoever maneuvering in this area as well, thanks to their more streamlined size and design that allowed them to be both fast and maneuverable in combat. Naruto was impressed by what he saw as he walked upon the deck to observe his crew in action as they prepare for the day of battle to come. At this moment Old Salt walked up to his captain and spoke. Everything G is all set for the coming battle, Captain. I was just wondering though. Naruto turned to the old sailor and asked, I don't think you ever wondered about anything, Salt, so what is on your mind? Everything. So much has happened. She found mean that pub kid all those years ago. Naruto nodded to Old Salt as he continued speaking. I never thought for one that I would live to see the day that any of our country would even rise again. But here it is, floating on the ocean, moving from one place to another with a purpose again. It's enough to make an old man cry with joy. Then there is you and why. Our sister, bringing back our customs with the ocean as well as the brotherhood. Do you want to know what the funny thing is, Salt? I never asked for any of this to happen at all. I was just a young kid who had to run to save himself, and by doing that I brought about all this. It makes you think, doesn't it? The old man smiled at his captain. It does. Everyone has faith in you, Naruto, you know that. I do. But even I have limits, and I fear that our enemy will never stop until we are all dead and gone from this world. And that is why you fight, my young captain, but just remember they have tried to wipe out the Brotherhood and have failed every time. Oh, don't get me wrong, they've hurt us badly, but we always keep coming back because that is what we must do. Remember, nothing is true, everything is permitted, for we are assassins. Tenten and her sensei Might Guy, or just Guy as he was more commonly known, watched their fellow teammate Neji as she continued to practice for his upcoming match T. However, it was behavior that was sending off warning bells to them as they watched him become more unstable and brutal in his fighting style, which was so unlike for him. Ten turned to her sensei and asked, Guy sensei, what is wrong with him? I honestly do not know, Tenten, but his flame of youth has been corrupted somehow. She turned to him with a look of annoyance upon her face and then said to him, Please sensei, not know with the flames of youth, but I do agree with you, something has corrupted him, but what? Just then the two of them noticed a strange-looking seal on the back of his neck. That was slightly reminiscent of the one that young Sasuke also had on the back of his neck courtesy of the snake Sannin Orochimaru. Tenten's warning bells were going all in her head as she remembered that the snake had made a deadly enemy of her future husband and that if Neji was trained by the snake as well it could be a very dangerous fight to be sure of. Sensei, I have to get to the Black Vein right now, it's important. Karen and Tayuya were currently playing a card game on the deck of the Vein with JSE not only watching but also betting on who would win thanks to the legendary luck of the Uzumaki clan. The two redheads were looking at each other with an intensity that had barely ever been matched by two battle-hardened warriors in the heat of battle. The two of them then threw a few more chips and laid down both their hands, revealing at the same time, full house. Oh shit, not again. The two girls shouted those words out at the same time as they had both managed to a full house of two different suits, shocking everyone present as they had finally been hoping to see one of them win but instead were treated to another stalemate. Old Salt could only shake his head at the crew's antics. He then heard the sound of a boat approaching the bow of the Vein, revealing young Tenten, who had a most concerned look upon her face. Permission to come aboard. Granted as always, but may I ask why you look so concerned? He asked her as he helped her aboard the ship as well. I have to see Naruto at once, it's important, it has something to do with the person that he's fighting in the EM. The look on Old Salt's face had changed from one of mild curiosity to a man of action as he motioned for her to follow him to the captain's quarters. The door to the cabin was open at this time as the two entered the room with a look of concern upon their faces. Naruto could make out the look of concern upon Tenten's face and just knew that something had come up that was important. What happened, Ten? Are you all right? She nodded her head to him and then spoke. I'm all right, but I have seen something on my teammate Neji, something that looks like a cursed seal. This caught Naruto's attention at once as he motioned for her to sit down and e-plane. Tell me exactly what you saw, and is he acting strange? By this point both Karen and Suigetsu entered the cabin as she began to e-plane what she saw. Ever since you told him at the finals that you would defeat him, he has been acting strange ever since, and today me and my teacher noticed a strange-looking seal on the back of his neck. Karen was shocked by what she had just heard and to her cousin, it must be Orochimaru's doing. I bet you that he saw some potential in Neji to defeat you and not only gave him the cursed seal, and has undoubtedly already advanced it to its final stage. The snake probably thinks that he can use a young Mr. Hyuga to finally destroy me and then being rid of my threats to him, if only he can that this will backfire upon him, as I have no intention of dying that day and I intend to beat some sense into his head if need be. Tenten was surprised by this comment as she then asked with curiosity. You made it sound as if you were going to kill him, did you change your mind or something? He turned to her with a look of curiosity as he then said, I don't intend to kill him, Ten, I just intend to beat some sense into his head. But if he proved to me that he is unreasonable, I will end him as a last resort. She was surprised by his statement but also realized that this might be the only way to save him from the decision he had made thanks to his clan's inability to change with the current times. Tenten knew that her friend's only hope was that the statement would give him a good beating, or that the unfortunate alternative would have them becoming nothing more than a pawn in the snake's deadly plans. He then turned to Suigetsu and said, Go and get my sister right now. The former Mist Shinobi quickly turned and left the cabin looking for his captain's red-headed sister, knowing that there was something important about to happen involving their family's unique abilities with seals. Now Ten, and tell me everything you can about that seal and everything. It was now no more than a day away from his wedding and many of his fellow pirate mills decided it was time for him to have a night out on the town, as it were. The small group of sailors and pirates entered a bar called the Drunken Leaf. All of the Leaf Shinobi who were present in the bar were shocked to say some of the most notorious pirates walking into the bar as if they owned the place. The bartender immediately looked up and sported a smile upon his face as he then motioned them forward. Welcome. Welcome, it is good to see you all have come. It is also a pleasure to see you again, boy. All of the gathered ninja were shocked to hear that the black bow was actually someone that the old bartender knew. As it is good to see you again as well, old man, but enough with that, as we do believe that we have a table with our names upon it and some good rum waiting for us. Right this way. He then asks, howled them to an area that had been reserved not too long ago and motioned for several young women to bring them quite a bit of food and drink, mainly rum. One of the many ninjas present in the bar at this time was none other than the third Hokage's son Asuma and his grandson. Everyone present began to listen to their conversation. Do you all remember that prophetic captain who was given command of that man of war and thought he could kill us all? Naruto smiled as he remembered that particular battle. Yeah, I remember that battle quite well, Jack. He was a fool to antagonize Minerva and Rouge that day. And if you listen carefully you can still hear him screaming for mercy from the lovely ladies. All of the pirates nodded their heads at this and then listened as another one of the gentlemen then spoke. Whatever did happen to that ship, out of curiosity? Jack then responded. Where you think the girls some sunk it out of spite. Those are two beautiful and dangerous women, who I do not want to be on the bad side of. One of the younger men in the group turned to Naruto and asked, so what are you going to do now, Captain? I honestly do not know, gentlemen, but I do now that I'm about to take on one of the greatest adventures of my life. All of the gathered sailors simply raised their glasses in a toast and said, and may it be a great one, foe. They all took a swig and felt a warm rum enter their bellies. This fire country rum ain't half bad. You're forgetting, my friend, that we are in a ninja village. The best rum in this country is at the shipping docks. All of the men agreed as they begin to tell those stories of the sea, unaware that Neji has also entered the bar to get a look at his opponent and listened as the black foe told a story. I got a good story to tell. All of us lords already know it. But you guys, I can tell you do not. Everyone in the bar was listening now as he continued. The story begins with a man who was made first meet a ship called the Black Pearl. He was a man who would later be called so evil by some that hell itself spit him back out. Everyone in the bar was surprised as he continued with the story. His captain had been tricked into giving up bearings on this unique island that cannot be found, except for the who already know where it is. Once he had the navigational bearings, he marooned his captain on a deserted island and left there with nothing but a single shot in a pistol to end it all. Neji was also listening, wondering what the meaning behind this story would be. They then arrived at the island and discovered the chest of gold coins waiting for them. They spent every last one. But they soon discovered that food they ate turned to ash in their mouths. The drink would not satisfy thirst, and all of the pleasurable company in the world would not relieve their lust. They were cursed, man, every last one of them. One of the ninjas in the room then asked, so what happened? The heathen gods demanded that the gold be returned with a blood sacrifice. And for 10 long years they hunted down every last piece. Unable to die, unable to live. Naruto and Jack both stood up at this point and walked forward to a little area that showed some moonlight. They could feel nothing, not the sea upon their faces or the warmth of a woman's touch. As soon as he said this, he put his hand in the moonlight and scared everyone in the bar, except the pirates, who watched his hand become nothing more than a skeleton with He then walked forward into the moonlight with Jack and then said, you all better start believing in ghost stories, because you're in one now. After saying this, he then pulled the cord out of the bottle of wine and drilled the contents, scaring everyone in the bar as the contents hit his skeleton. Neji ran out of tea. He bar scared, wondering if he could kill the foe, and then remembered that this must be an ability of theirs and that it only appeared at night in the moonlight. He could still kill the black foe and then the snake himself. Naruto then deactivated the genjutsu and then began to laugh out loud, all to hear. That is the one of the best damn ghost story that I have ever heard or told, and the illusion helps out a lot. The two pirate lords, however, turned to each other as Jack then spoke. He was here, you know. I wouldn't worry about him, Jack. He doesn't know what's really coming. Once Naruto was finished saying, they then returned to their table and had a few more drinks, told a few more story, and made their way back to the ships, as the next day would be something truly special. The small Chair Nation fleet that consisted of 3 men of wars and 5 pirate lord vessels moved silently through the blue waters of the ocean on their route to the small island that would host the ceremony for Naruto's and Tenten's wedding. Tenten herself was currently below decks upon the Rookin, getting dressed in her beautiful wedding gown with the help of Lady Rouge and May. May could only smile as she held the younger girl into her dress. How do you feel? Are you nervous? Tenten could not hide the look of concern upon her face, but also that of happiness, as she then replied, I would be lying if I said no. But at the same time I feel rather happy about this day. Rouge let out a bit of laughter. That's to be expected, young lady, but I am curious, what are you going to do after you are married? Tenten already had an idea what she meant. Well, I have a feeling sooner or later I'm going to wind up pregnant, but I have no intention of trying to stop it either. If it happens, it happens. Rouge could only smile as she then said to the young blonde, "It's quite understandable, young one. When it is your time to be a mother you shall know for sure, just as I did." Tenten was quite surprised to learn this. "You have children. But you do not look that old." Rouge could only nod her head as she then spoke to the younger girl before her. "I'm actually only about 38 years old, but I look 22. For my children, I have 2 of them who live with their father on our special island so that our enemies do not find them." "Do you miss them?" Tenten asked. "Yes, I do a lot, but I do get to see them from time to time when we are not busy. They are very loving children and help me with some of the problems that I am under," Rouge said. But at that moment a young man from the front of the deck of the ship quickly entered the cabin with a concerned look upon his face. "Captain, there are several ships off the port bow that are headed this way." "What flags are they flying?" she asked him. "Neo East India Trading Company, Captain." She instantly became a woman of action. "Tenten, put this on over your wedding dress. You do have your weapon on you right now." Tenten quickly walked over to a small area and held up a rather large scroll of some kind and then nodded. "Never home without them." Karen, Tuyuya and Old Salt all looked out upon the ocean and admired its beauty at its vastness, only to see a rat. Her large storm was coaching up to them fast, but fortunately was not headed towards the island where the ceremony would be taking place this day. However, all of their thoughts about this day were rested as they all saw the Rookin and the Kutsi pulling up alongside the Veen. Right at that moment they saw both Rouge and Tenten jumped on board the Veen from the Rookin and was quickly followed by Jack, and then came to the realization that something bad had just happened. Tuyuya quickly ran up to them and asked, "What the hell are you all doing here?" They all pointed off to the side of the ship at the fast approaching Neo East India Trading Company. "Oh, come on," and gave us a break. They all just looked at her as she then said, "I'm going to go and get Naruto, and everyone keep an eye on those ships." She then ran to her father's personal cabin and ran right into the room and said, "Naruto, we have enemy ships off the stern of the Veen." He quickly ran past her and onto the deck, pulling out his telescope and gave the NEIT ships a good look over. The lead ship was quickly outpacing the rest of the fleet and had gotten much closer than he would have liked, but it was who he saw on deck that made his blood boil. "Well, that's something you don't see every day, sis." He then handed her the telescope and pointed it at the bridge of the enemy ship and said, "Have a look, sister, and one of the men who helped kill our mother." With this said, she quickly put the telescope to eye and looked upon for the first time one of the men who had taken so much from both of them. A strong feeling of rage filled her heart as she heard her brother shout out orders to the Veen's crew. "To arms, gentlemen and ladies. Before us is the so-called mighty Neo East India Company, who believe themselves above all laws of men." Every member of the crew listened intently as he then spoke again for all to hear. "We will not endanger the fleet, but we will not fire the first shot either. If they want to fight us, then we will give it to them. Now who is with me?" Every member of the crew shouted out as one and ready the ship for battle as Naruto took the helm of the ship and set a new course right for the storm. I would like to hear what you all think about this chapter, as I will begin to work on the net one soon. Please read and review. The Black Veen moved quickly through the water, despite the heavy rain that was all around them courtesy of the storm, when one of the lookouts shouted for all to hear, "Maelstrom." Naruto quickly made the course correction and headed right for the maelstrom without hesitation. Jack then shouted out to him, "What the hell are you doing?" "I'm going further in. They be crazy to follow us." Jack then looked the younger captain in the eyes and said, "Are you mad, foe?" He turned to the older pirate and said, "Really now, are you afraid to get wet, Jack?" Just then the sound of cannon fire caught them all by surprise as Naruto turned to Jack and said, "Captain Webb, take the helm of my ship right this moment." Jack could only smile at Naruto as he then quickly took the helm and began to dish out orders. "Pull out all the canvas and speed you can, boys. Give it all that you can, and remember that dying is the day worth living for." Naruto then ran to the back of the stern to see how close the enemy ship was and immediately called out orders, "Fire the stern cannons." All of the projectile hit true, sending part of the deck flying throughout the area of the enemy ship as it continued to gain on them rapidly. Naruto quickly ordered a reload of the guns and then turned to Jack. "They're gaining on us fast." Jack looked back quickly and then spoke, then we go further in, we can then cut across the faster water's foe. Naruto then shouted out to his men. Prepared to broadside the men. All of the gun crews immediately went into action preparing their weapons for the moment of firing as the Veen made her turn going further into the maelstrom. Just seconds after completing the turn, several more cannonballs had just impacted the water where they had just been, making the enemy ship follow them in further as well. The 5 pirate lords and one bride watched the enemy ship trying to keep up with the much faster Veen, only to watch it struggle to keep its place in the maelstrom as they positioned themselves for a strong broadside. Naruto quickly turned to Old Salt and motioned for the older sailor to head below decks to oversee the gun crews there. 2 of the defenders repeatedly looked to their superior as he then said, "Just wait BOYS until they are board with us before fire an eagle vision to study the enemy ship," as he waited for them to be within perfect firing position, just before the enemy ship could even fire her own broadside. All of the mariner lords called out as one, "Fire!" As soon as these words left their mouths, the sound of thunder was heard throughout the deck of the Black Veen as the cannons let loose ir deadly payload of deadly explosive cannon shot. Each shot that hit true caused massive damage and splinters to fly throughout the area, killing many on the deck as the battle raged on. With each sing moment of the battle, the ships moved closer and closer to each other while firing shot after shot at each other. The Veen for the most part took her hits without a problem but dished it out on a much more deadlier scale. Just then several of the Veen's crew members then noticed that many of the enemy crew members were planning to board their ship. "Captain, they preparing to board us, what should we do?" At that very moment they begin to board the Veen, only to receive resistance as many of them were shot off their ropes and into the maelstrom as they tried to board. Naruto himself pulled out several of his main guns that were just some of the many weapons that he carried on him at all times and began to make them rule the day they had dared to challenge him and his mighty ship. But despite the hail of bullets that was fired at them, many of the enemy sailors managed to make it on board and began to fight like there was no tomorrow. Both Naruto and Tenten had engaged the enemy together, moving as one coordinated pair of attackers, ending the lives of their enemies as they went. At this time Tenten felt the protective clothing over her wedding dress be ripped away by one of her attackers, who then received a sword to his face as a penance for his actions. Naruto had just killed another enemy and turned quickly to his future wife in all of her stunning beauty and spent a few seconds admiring her before returning to the battle. The 2 of them were now fighting back to back as Naruto could no longer take it and turned her around, looking deep into her eyes and said, "Let's just get married right now." The look of shock on her face was visible to all. They then had to move to avoid an enemy that was making a run at them as she then said to him, "I don't think now is the best time. Now may be the only time. I do love you, what is your answer, Ten?" She gave him a smile and then turned to Jack and shouted out, "Captain Jack, marry us." Jack, however, was in heavy combat at this moment and shouted out to them, "I'm a little busy at the moment, guys." Naruto then shouted out to his fellow mariner lord, "Jack, you ass, do it now." Jack let out a sigh and then said, "Fine then, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." But before he could even finish the net part, he was interrupted by another enemy. "To nail your ass to the mast, you son of a bitch." Naruto then turned to her and began to give his vows. "Tenten, do you take me to be your husband?" "I do." "Great." They were then forced to avoid another set of enemies cutting them down as they went as Tenten then began her vows. "Naruto Uzumaki, do you take me to be your wife, in sickness and in health?" Right at that moment she had to literally impaled one of the enemy soldiers upon her sword and then muttered, with health being the less likely, "I do." Jack continued to fight his enemies as he then spoke out for all to hear once more, as Capt. "I now pronounce you." But before he could even finish, however, he had to impale yet another soldier and shoot another in the head as the young couple attempted to kiss, the 2 running into that same problem. "You may kiss." And here comes another idiotic soldier who Agai and now lies on the deck of the ship dead as a freshly cooked lobster. "You may kiss." The interruptions for them were becoming a nuisance as they tried to kiss once more, only to hear Jack shout out, "Just kiss." The 2 men then quickly embraced any deep, passionate kiss despite the chaos going on around them. Despite their own fights, Minerva, Rouge and Karen could only look on the couple kissing in a LL of their glory and made sounds of pleasure or said how cute as they then simultaneously impaled enemies upon their swords at the same time scaring many of the male pirates as they went. By this time, the larger enemy ship had taken significant damage and was already beginning to sink further into the water as the whirlpool from the maelstrom raged on. One of the cannon shots hit in an area near the bow, causing a massive explosion that literally ripped the front of the ship off, sending even more of the enemy soldiers upon the Veen as they tried to avoid dying in the deadly storm. One of the enemies who landed on the Veen's desk was none other than the captain of the enemy ship himself. The man was quite large and had on a rather fine piece of clothing despite the rigors of life at sea. On of his hands also appeared to have been made out of puppet-like materials from the land of wind. Around his neck was a blood-red cross that identified him as a Templar, and then pulled the sword from his side thanks to the strange prosthetic hand he had, and charged into battle, killing several of the Veen's crew as he went, only to receive a foot to the face courtesy of Tayuya. Naruto saw just who was upon deck and quickly turned to Jack and shouted out, "Get us the hell out of here, Jack, or it's a locker for us all." Jack nodded to him and began to make the course right out of the maelstrom as they all watched the enemy should be ripped apart by the massive whirlpool's wrath. The man looked at the two siblings and just laughed at them as he then spoke, "Ah, the children of that red-headed bitch. Don't worry, you two, I'll be reuniting you two with her soon. Tell me, do you fear death?" The large man's response was to see them both move into a battle formation and charge directly at him. Large man proved to be a rather effective swordsman as he engaged the brother and sister team, but found none of the usual support. He had these kinds of fights where he would use his crew as well to gain an advantage. Tenten had managed to kill several more of the enemies aboard the Veen and turned to see battle going on between her husband and sister-in-law as well as the strange man who seemed to be trying to cut them down. She moved closer and noticed that there was something strange about the sword he carried and that it seemed to call to her as she moved forward. The two pirate lords that were fighting this man then noticed that the sword belonging to one of their fallen comrades and realized that he was the murderer Fire Lord of the Mariners. Naruto has become even more enraged than before but remained in control. "So you killed him, you bastard." The large man only smiled and laughed at them as he then said, "It was so easy to end him, boy, and now I will add your blades to my collection." He would have said more had it not been for Tenten knocking the sword out of his hands. He was then stabbed in the heart by both Naruto and Tayuya, only to their surprise not to die from his injury. "No man can kill me now. Not even a Mariner Lord." The two of them pulled their swords out of his chest as he began to laugh at them, only for it to turn into a groan of pain as the tip of the sword he had been using just a moment ago emerged out of his chest right where his heart would be located. He then watched as the sword was pulled out of his chest, leaving behind what looked like burning flesh as he turned around to see Tenten not only holding the blade but also unaffected by its powers, which should not have been happening, and then realized he had been ended by a young girl no less. As the fire consumed his body, leaving him in shock, he whispered out, "My beloved, forgive me for what I have done." Naruto then walked in front of him and said, "May you find peace in the net world, you bastard, rest in peace." With that said, he then kicked the man off of the Veen's deck as they pull out of the maelstrom, only to watch what was left of the enemy ship literally be ripped apart as the whirlpool closed in high into the air for all to see. The Land of Water and Mariner Lord fleet and the Neo-East India Trading Company fleet watched as the Black Veen emerged from the storm. Veen pulled up alongside the NEIT fleet, still keeping their guns ready for action if needed, as Naruto then shouted out to the other ship, "Come and collect your dead and the survivors, get them off my ship right this instant." The captain of the East ship immediately motioned for this crew to do as the Black Foe had instructed. He then turned to the deadly-looking pirate lord and spoke, "You will pay for this, pirate." Naruto looked the man in his eyes and spoke in a darker tone, "Don't push your luck with me, boy. Every single ship that was traveling with me could have fired on your fleet at any time they wished. And the only reason you all even still alive if it's because I wished it, so don't push me." The captain of the East Fleet nodded and motioned for his crew to work faster, removing their dead and wounded from the deck of the Veen. As soon as they were finished, the black ship moved away as fast as it could and rejoined the water fleet, leaving the captain as purple-eyed as before. As on of his officers walked up to him and asked, "Should we open fire on them, sir?" He nodded his head in a negative and then spoke, "No, I won't risk the fleet's safety for some delusion of grandeur and desire for fame. The admiral brought it on himself." Besides, you have to be crazy to take on the black foe. Naruto walked the deck of the Veen looking over his crew as he went. Eventually he walked up to the ship's doctor, who's known only as Bones to everyone on board, and seemed quite busy as he worked on the crew. Naruto then spoke to the older man and asked of him, "What's the butcher's bill today, Bones?" Bones. His glasses put him back in his face and turned to his young friend and spoke in a somber tone. 3 dead, 4 injured, not critically, mind you. All in all, I say we got off pretty easily. Damn, I didn't ask for any of this to happen, Bones. The doctor nodded his head and then put his hands on the younger blonde's shoulder. You made the right choice. If you have not done that, he would have gone after the entire fleet, and not just us. It would have been a lot worse, I'm afraid, and a lot more lives would have been lost. Naruto had to admit at least that the casualties had been a lot more than when he was in the war fighting for the freedom of the land of water. I'll never get used to losing people, Bones. No one ever does, Naruto. We have to make do with what we have, and in you case you made the best choice you can, all things considered. The doctor said to him, trying to comfort him bit. Listen to you, the philosopher. The doctor rolled his eyes and then spoke. Damn it, man, I'm a doctor, not a philosopher. And if you do want to speak to a philosopher, just go talk to Raven or your wife. She seems to have a good head on her shoulders. Naruto gave the doctor one of those looks and then said, Don't go there, Bones, but I do hate to admit it that you may be right. The speaking to Raven. Bones looked at the young woman with curiosity, noticing what sword she was now carrying. Is that the fire blade? Yes, that son of a bitch killed him. Naruto nodded his head in a negative and then spoke once more. No, but she will soon. The doctor then put on a smile and decided to ask a question. So when are you going to marry the others? Naruto let out a groan and then turned to the doctor and said, Please do not remind me, Bones. It's bad enough that I have to keep an eye out for Gaara. Now I don't need you advertising me to the entire female population of the world, you know. We just want what's best for you, foe. I'll be done with setting them up for burial in a couple of minutes. Thanks, Bones. Tenten had noticed the looks she was receiving from the crew and wondered what they were all about as Jack then walked up to her. I have to say that was one interesting way to get married. She looked him in the eye and said, It was, but can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Why are they looking at me now all of a sudden, and what's with that look? Who? Just knew what she was talking about, the sword in her hands. They're looking at you and that sword, Ten. She was truly surprised by this as he then continued to explain. Tenten, the blade you are whole. Ding at this moment is one of the 7 swords of the Mariner Lords. This one is known as the Fire Fini. And the reason they are all looking at you is because only a Mariner Lord can even hold that blade or the net wielder that it has chosen. She was truly surprised by this as she looked at the sword in her hands. You make it sound as if the sword is alive. For all we know it is. Each one of them is aware in a way, and you will have to control its power and ability. Also, either the last lord will choose their success, or in this kind of case the blade will choose its new master, and it has chosen you, Tenten Uzumaki, to become one of us. Unfortunately, you will have help. The water fleet had continued along its course despite what had happened earlier this day. The fleet, however, did stow peace so that the Black Veen and her crew could pay their final respects to their fallen comrades. Upon the deck stood all of the captains and 3 bodies with their personal Jolly Rogers over their Rima-ins, waiting to be reunited to see in death. Naruto read from the good book, sending his fallen crew members on their way to the networld and hopefully keeping their souls at rest and undisturbed by their enemies. Once he was finished reading the passage, he closed the book and looked upon his crew and guests and spoke for all to hear. I pray that this is the last time I have to do this, but I know that it will not be. And while they are gone from us, we must continue to fight our enemies that wish to enslave us or murder us just for who we are and what we can do. Today one of those men has passed on as well. But unlike our comrades, he will not rest in peace, for when this man died it was without honor. Everyone present agreed with him as he turned to do his duty. We now commit your souls and bodies to sea so that they may be restored when the resurrection happens. Until then we trust for you to wait for us. Another man began playing bagpipes as the bodies were dumped overboard to rest forever in the great ocean. Eventually the fleet had reached its destination of a small island where the festivities would take place. The couple had decided to have another ceremony on the beach, as originally planned despite what happened in the battle. Unfortunately for Suigetsu, it was Karen who had caught the flowers from Tenten, sending a chill up his spine like never before, especially when she gave him a predatory look. At this moment in time, Naruto stepped on the stage that had been arrested for the musical groups to play and picked up a guitar and started to sing to his new wife. To our surprise, he walked up behind her and she realized that he was a shadow clone playing the music as they began to dance. Love Song Requiem, by Training Yesterday. The couple danced as Tenten listened to the lyrics and realized how much it reflected her husband in so many ways. As she listened to the song, he could not stop the tears from coming out of her eyes. Eventually the song stopped and to their amazement they watched as Yuya walked up on stage into guitar as well and made a movement of her head to her brother's shadow clone as the two begin to play a particular song that would unite the couple even. Ho Hey, by the Lumineers. Everyone in the crowd also joined in as they left. The music takes them over and felt it lift their spirits after what had happened both just recently and from the war. Even the couple began to sing the lyrics as well. I belong with you, you belong with me, you're my sweetheart. His sister and clone then began to sing a certain part of the song that they felt was important to everyone present and sign it passion as they knew that everyone needed to hear it, especially after everything they had been through. Love, we need it now. Let's hope for some. CHCH. Earden had their drinks to their heart's content. One man could be heard saying for all to hear, knowing how true his words would be. The net date as the eam begin as well as their date with great battle. Well, Captain. Fo she fancies you all right, and to all of us here drink up, for tomorrow we dance with death once more. As the fleet headed back to Feeney's nest to await the events of the net day, Naruto and Tenten settled into his personal catalysts to spend the first night of their marriage together amongst other things. The song Otherworld, by the Black Mages starts playing in the background. As the Chunin Eam Stadium comes into view. It was a busy day in the Hidden Leaf Village as the crowds entered the stadium to watch the coming battles with almost a voracious appetite, as it were. These common people were also the daimyos who ran the countries, also walking in to enjoy the show that was about to unfold. Almost all of the competitors had arrived except for one Sasuke Uchiha and his one-eyed sensei. Neji was looking Naruto right in the eyes, trying to intimidate him, but was finding it useless as he could not see the pirate lord's eyes at all. The proctor then spoke for all to hear. Will all other competitors please leave the arena at this time? With this said, everyone else nodded their heads and walked up the steps to the competitor's booth as he then said, thank you. Two young men looked each other right in the eyes, waiting for the moment to strike at each other. The proctor could see this and moved back a little bit as he then shouted for all to hear, fight. With this said, the two of them shot at each other like a bat out of hell. Each one of them was trading blows after blows as the boy had only just begun. Neji was hoping that he would not have to use his special abilities, but had a feeling that he would have to, as he felt that the black foe was in fact holding back. This only served to infuriate the young Hyuga even more as the battle raged on. Naruto on the other hand had seen heavy combat in the war both on land and water. It had hardened him to an extent that only a few would even understand at all. Neji then decided to go the psychological route, hoping to find an opening that he could exploit. Are you aware that fate has determined me the winner of this match, pirate? Naruto could only laugh at him as he then said, fate is that your accuse. It is not an accuse you are fated to lose to me this day. It will show that pirates are just like every other person in this world. He said with a dark smile on his face as the seal upon his neck influenced him even more. Naruto could only laugh at him even more as he then said, except we are not like most men, boy, we are pirates. And we defy all expectations. Neji was just becoming even more enraged and decided to end this fight for good. Without warning, he activated the first level of his curse seal and ran right at Naruto, hoping to end him right then and there. Much to Neji's surprise, the young pirate lord was keeping up with him but was finding it harder to stop his attacks, and unfortunately some did get through his defenses. However, Neji came to a realization that his opponent could still fight back brutally as he receives a strong fist to the base which sent him flying a few feet before he hit the ground. Naruto reopened his block pathways and walked forward, knowing that he has to get his opponent to go to the last level if he wants to defeat him and quite possibly save him from himself. Not bad for a slave. Neji looked up at him with hatred in his eyes. What did you call me? You heard me, boy. You are nothing more than a slave, not only to your family but if fate itself. I know what happened to him, to your father, and I know that he defied fate itself. We chose to save your uncle's life. I should know. I stand with the third and my mother before she was killed." Neji let the anger take him as he no longer sought to control the curse seal upon him and let it control him instead. He changed into a large creature with spider-like legs coming out of his back, making him absolutely monstrous. Naruto now did his best to try to stop the enraged young man. Only Obi beaten black and blue by the audience's perspective. Neji then threw his opponent on the ground hard and then kicked the black foe in the chest, sending him flying into a tree that was nearby. He then turned the proctor and said, "Call the match. He is defeated." However, it was the sounds of bones mending that caught everyone's attention as Naruto walked out of the wooded area, now holding his word at the ready as if nothing had happened to him at all. Surprise was now on everyone's face as Naruto simply walked up to them and then spoke. "Well, I can honestly say that hurt like hell, but in all honesty I've had worse." Neji and the proctor were in shock as he continued to speak. "However, I now have to break you and that slimy soul fragment of a pedophile that calls itself a Sannin. You must have thought that I would be an easy victory, that you could kill me with each. Am I right?" All Neji could do was nod his head as Naruto then spoke once more. "Well, you thought wrong. Remember that story you overheard me and Jack telling everyone in that bar? Well, guess what, it's all true." Neji was still trying to come to grips with what was happening as the young pirate lord Bef or him seemed to burst into blue flames before him and said, "That's right, boy, you'd best start believing ghost stories. Because now you're in one." The foe was a blur of motion as all 8 of the extra legs that it had been a part of his body literally flew off from a single cut of the maelstrom. But before Neji could even hit the ground, he was grabbed by the flaming skeleton and began to receive the beating of a lifetime. The last punch was so hard that it sent him flying into and then through a nearby tree before hitting the ground. Everyone was shocked as a large tree took some time to eventually hit the ground as Naruto calmly walked over to injured opponent who had widely managed to get back on his feet and in a moment of arrogance began to threaten his opponent. "You cannot defy fate. Compared to you I am a god." The skeleton just looked at him with a bit of confusion and then without warning grabbed him by his ankle and began to slam him into the ground left and right over and over again. He then held the battered young man up to look at him and then proceeded to slam him into the ground 3 more times, making a decent-sized crater as he did it, muttering the words for all to hear, "Puny God." Neji was laying on his back in the freshly made crater, moaning in unimaginable amounts of pain that he had ever experienced, and then came to the realization that he ever stood a chance against the black foe. Unfortunately, his ordeal was far from over as a skeleton hand grabbed him by the shirt over his chest, lifting him into the air and then to his surprise training him around, ripping the clothing away to reveal the curse seal itself. Naruto then put his hand to the curse seal, unlocking its internal workings and removing the soul fragment that lay within. This piece of the snake Sannin's soul screamed out in agony, and what no one could see was that up in the cage's booth, disguised as the wind shadow, the real snake held onto his chair in unimaginable pain, feeling everything that was being done to the fragment. The fragment itself, which had a more snake-like appearance, then began to plead for its essence, "Please have mercy." The burning skeleton had by this point let go of poor Neji, who had hit the ground hard and returned to normal, no longer being under the curse seal's influence and power. Naruto just let out a laugh and then said, "Like the mercy you have shown your victims. I'm sorry, I'm all out of mercy, you bastard. Look into my eyes." The soul fragment then began to scream out in agony as it looked into Naruto's eyes. The fragment then began to quite literally burn as he then spoke to it, "Your soul is stained with blood of the innocent. Feel their pain and rest in peace." In the fragment, in the origin, appearance everything as it as slowly burned away in front of everyone present in the stadium. The blue flame then seemed to disappear from him entirely, revealing his normal appearance as he walked up to the injured Neji and put his sword to the young man's throat and said, "Ask your uncle what happened that night, and know that if you ever hone your cousin again, I will be there to bleed you dry, till I make myself clear." Through pain he managed to speak, "Crystal." Quote, "Well, that's good. Now if you'll accuse me, call the match, proctor, it's over." The man could only know his head as he then announced the winner, watching the pirate lord walk up to the competitor's booth. Gaara had by this time arrived on the arena floor, waiting for her opponents to arrive. Unfortunately, after 5 minutes he did not appear, making everyone quite angry at his tardiness. After talking to the Hokage, who decided to give the boy a chance to compete later on, it was announced that the fight would be postponed, making the crowd very upset. Oot was then silenced by the words of the young redhead, "Silence, I kill you." Her brother and sister, who happened to be her teammates, felt a bit embarrassed as the older sister turned to her brother and said, "You just had to make that dead terrorist dummy." This was a very interesting chapter for me to write. Also, I don't know when the net chapter will be out, as I have a lot of work to do with He net chapter as well as a few other stories, and then of course I will be playing the new Assassins game as well as the new Batman, and of course several classics, and getting ready for Halloween. Please read and review and enjoy. Happy Halloween. First of all, I would like to apologize to all the readers as I did not check this chapter for the impressive amount of mistakes that are in it, and that I am currently working to correct as many of them as I can find. Anytime I feel a section is the least acceptable, I will update the chapter, so please accept my apologies and enjoy the story as I continued to work on it. I've done as much work on this short chapter as I can, but will continue to look for things, but it should be a lot better now. Just to let all readers know, I intend to continue this particular story and have also written the brand new version of this story called Assassin's Creed Black Foe. This new version is now available to read and is also a origin story as well as his Evan to Al development as both a assassin and pirate. Also, I like to say that I originally had every intention of including many of the ideas from the new story into this one, but realized they would work, so I wrote the new story instead, and hope you enjoy both of them. Also, my end notes will have a small preview of another assassin story I am writing and want to hear what you all think. Please enjoy. Ra was most definitely not a happy young woman as she re-entered the competitor's bow and then walked over to her siblings, not saying a word, despite the fact that they knew that she was rather unhappy at not being able to fight the arrogant Uchiha in this competition. Naruto was also a bit disappointed that he could not watch Gaara in action, as well as it will be a fantastic showing of her skills and abilities that she possessed. The net two people to then take part in the tournament was none other than Gaara's older sister and a lazy young man from the Nara clan who was just about to forfeit He match until Naruto himself simply gave the lazy-ass Cloud Watcher a gentle push off the balcony and into the arena below. Needless to say, this sounds of a person cursing could be heard all throughout the arena. All of the competitors watched this match with a bit of curiosity, as the two of them proved to be a devastating fighting force against each other, which resulted in the disruption of much of the arena floor as they went. Much to everyone's surprise, it was Shikamaru who proved to be the victor in the end, despite forbidding the end of the match. Naruto could only laugh at his antics and skill level as he pulled out a small golden pocket watch and saw that it had taken some time for the match to finish. He then looked up at the cage booth and wondered when it would start, and he could finally put an end to the snake once and for all. All he had to do now was to wait for the opportunity to present itself. Orochimaru was now very concerned about the invasion, as he had heard the rumor of the powers of the seven Mariner Lords possessed and just what they could do when they were threatened. He could have sworn that he saw the black foe's skeleton face had almost smiled at him while he had been destroying his soul fragment. Basically, he was now praying that his plans would not only stop the Fire Navy in this prophetic village, as he had come to call it, but also the pirates. The only reason he might not kill them at all was to deal with the threat of the Red Clouds and the other Templars, but that was not part of the plan this day. No, his plan on this day was for them all to be dead by the end of this day. Especially the assassins. The rest of the matches had gone by rather quickly by Naruto's standards, and he had been surprised by most of the matches, but had to admit he was even more surprised by most of their battle style so far. But in fact, even he had to admit that most of them had been, for the lack of a better word, not too surprising in their outcomes. The net fight had been between Shikamaru and Temari, which had proven to be quite an interesting battle. Instead of it being mostly a physical battle, it turned into one of intelligence and strategy, as the two constantly attempted to find an opening to strike. The battle itself proved to be a show of their different kinds of intelligence and ultimately ended in a forfeit by Shikamaru, who had, despite this, had obviously won the battle. It was clear to Naruto that he had forfeited the match to save as much energy for the coming invasion as possible. Unfortunately, forfeits seemed to be the common theme of the day, as more and more chose not to battle and saved their energy. Eventually, the match for Gaara and Sasuke had come around once more, leaving the redhead once again standing in the middle of the arena, waiting for her opponent with the same look of displeasure upon her face once more as she waited for his arrival. even the proctor had become quite agitated and was just about to call the match despite what everyone wants when a tornado of leaves appeared in the middle of the arena, revealing none other than Sasuke and his sensei. Everyone who had been waiting for this match to begin was now practically screaming out in excitement as they waited for it to begin. Naruto knew that soon the invasion would start and motioned for his fellow pirates to move into position as it was time to take care of the Hidden Leaf's snake problem once and for all. He then looked up at the cage booth and noticed that Snake had already set things in motion as the battle raged below them. All 5 of the pirate lords made their way to the roof that was connected to the cage booth. The 5 warriors of the sea did not have to wait long as an explosion was sent off in the booth, surprising everyone in the process. The Snake's bodyguards quickly set up their barrier, knowing that they needed to keep as many of the stronger ninjas and especially the pirate lords out of the makeshift arena to give their master the chance to finally end his old teacher's life once and for all. The Snake quickly tore off the flesh mask he had been using to disguise himself as the cage so he could get close to his old teacher. "I told you you should have picked a new Hokage and retired, old man." The 3rd Hokage just smiled as he then spoke to his fallen student. "You are right, my old student, I should have retired, however you did not take into account them." Thunderstruck by AC/DC starts playing in the background. Just then the Snake turned his head to see 5 Mariner Lords standing just outside of the barrier, looking at him with a predatory grin as they then began to physically change. Naruto once again became the skeleton, but instead of blue his skeletal structure, it appeared to be wind moving around it instead. The net one was his sister, who appeared to be turning into what looked like a giant wolf of some kind and let out a ear-splitting the howl as she stared him down with a look of ravenous hunch and desire to tear him limb from limb as she did so. The net one was Minerva herself, who seemed to change into a kind of ice angel with large wings made of pure ice, lifting her into the air for all to see. After her was Jack, who seemed to change into a large great white shark hybrid, who then bared his teeth at the Snake in a grin, revealing his many rows of sharp teeth. The final one was Lady Rouge W. Ho simply held her sword in one and played with what looked like the voodoo doll hanging from her sword's hilt, and like the others she too changed into a walking skeleton with bits of dried up flesh upon it as she walked forward towards the barrier along with the other mariners. Naruto then brought up the maelstrom and in a downward arc released a blade of wind at the barrier, completely destroying a large section of it, allowing the 5 pirates to easily enter the arena to finally end this inhuman terror once and for all. Orochimaru was now in total shock as he saw all of the Mariner Lords transformed into these menacing figures and simply shattered his barrier like it had been nothing to them at all. After all, they had simply walked right through and were now staring him down like a predator stalking its prey with the intent to kill. If he had been any other man, he would have listened to his instincts and made an instant ran for it, but instead he becomes somewhat defiant as of late and decided to leave them a parting gift. Virtually everyone in the stadium was now watching what was happening up on the roof as the 5 Mariner Lords bared down on one of the most dangerous ninjas in the entire world. Orochimaru could only stare in shock at what he was seeing. He heard stories of their sheer power, but now he wanted it for himself. However, he knew that if he would surely die in the process, so instead he activated the Imperial World Resurrection Jutsu and prepared to make a run for it, since knowing that this was a fight he could not win. The 3rd Hokage and the Mizukage also being present did not help matters any either. Everyone took up their positions in a fighting stance, ready to fight the resurrected cages. Orochimaru then he gave his own predatory smile and motioned his bodyguards to follow him as he jumped off the side of the stadium, summoning one of his rather large snakes to make his escape, knowing that he had to get to the Sound Fleet as soon as possible. The 3rd Hokage turned his head to the skeleton surrounded by wind and spoke. "Naruto, you have to go after Orochimaru right this instant and stop him from whatever he's planning to do." "You got it, old man." With that said and done, he quickly turned to his sister and nodded to her as they returned to normal, and then jumped off the side of the stadium, as well as summoning 2 large eagles in midair. As they followed the trail of destruction in the wake of the escaping snake sage, who had summoned his own ride that was now tearing through not only the leaf ranks but his own as he made his escape. Unfortunately, his destination was clear to everyone. "It looks like he's going to Fini Nest Harbor," Chiyuya said to her brother as they flew off in pursuit of their target. Naruto could only nod his head in agreement to her as they followed their prey, knowing soon they would be in a great battle, but at the same time he could only think about what was going to happen to the others back in the village. The 3 remaining Mariner Lords and the 2 cages stared down the 3 reanimated 5 shadows, hoping to find some way to resolve this without more loss of life in the process, but realized they were in a dangerous situation. The 3rd watched as the mud clone of his former student which had been left behind inserted strange-looking knives in the back of their heads, bringing them totally to life. As the jutsu took its effect in the 3 affected by this went on the attack. Without warning, the first Hokage created a small forest on top of the stadium, giving himself and his brother the best chance since this was their kind of train to fight in, and while this gave them a small edge in the fight to come, the defenders realized that they were still conscious but unable to control their bodies as the first began issuing warnings about what he was going to do well on this strange autopilot that had been forced upon him. To the surprise of everyone, however, Lady Rouge went straight for the 4th Hokage, taking out the mud clone as she went and managed to grab him by the face as she made some kind of voodoo chant. The knife that had been in his head simply fell out, hitting the Epos, detailing and turning to dust in the process. The 4th was surprised to be in control of his actions once more, but realized that he would very soon return to the land of the dead once more, agent of the death god as part of the deal he had made to save his home. He turned to the decaying woman and smiled, realizing who she was now. Been a long time. How's your brother, by the way? Lady Rouge just rolled her eyes at him and spoke. Much better now. He has taken your comments to heart and has made life of our 2 hosts very comfortable. That's good. I know I don't have long on this plane of essence, but may I ask a favor of you? She nodded her head as he spoke, despite turning to ash and preparing to return to the land of the dead. Please help my children grow stronger and avenge us and all the others the Templars continue to hurt. I will. I swear it, she said to him as he nodded his head at her and returned to the land of the dead, leaving the sacrificed individual behind, but still breathing as the Voodoo Queen had spared her from death. Rouge then turned her attention to the other reanimated Hokages and felt a bit of anger go through her body as the dead should be left to rest in peace, and knew that she would have to do her duty to save them from this cruel fate. She quickly cleared the distance between the 2 of them and activated her blade's unique ability Mind with her own abilities and stopped 2 undead cages in their tracks. Get that damn knife out of their heads, it's the only way to stop this from getting worse and to set their souls free. The 2 remaining Mariner Lords quickly acted as they plunged their hands deep into the cage's skulls and ripped the knives from them. Rouge then released her hold on the 2 of them and began to chant a right to pay as she returned to normal, sending the 2 warriors back to the land of the dead to rest in peace. Looks like everything worked out so far, but we have to get back to the harbor to stop that son of a bitch once and for all, Jack said as he also returned to normal. Minerva nodded her head as she jumped off the side of the building, still in her ice angel form, extending the crystal-like wings further as she flew through the air at high speeds back towards the fleet, knowing that she had to give the 2 siblings as much support as she could, knowing what was to come as the battle for Phoenix Nest Harbor was about to begin. My apologies if this is a rather short chapter, but I've been working on more than one story for some time now and want to take a break from this particular one for a bit of time, but plan to definitely finish it. Also, I have published the brand new rewrite version of this called Assassin's Creed Black Foe, which is told from a totally new point of view, and would like to hear what you think about both versions of this story. I am also writing a number assassin story called Lazarus, which will be a reincarnation story of Edward becoming Naruto. Please read and review.